and welcome back to the Partner Podcast, everybody. I am your host, Robert Patrick Lewis, and today I have an amazing guest that I've been looking forward to quite a while. Rather than the usual hubbub that we do, and when we start off and I go into a little thing and we do, music or whatever, we're just going to go with the interview. I've been waiting to talk with Sevan for a couple weeks now. And in reality, I've probably been waiting a lot longer than that because I think he's somebody that's very interesting. Somebody that has a lot to add to not only my perspective of life, but our conversation. And I think a lot of information for everybody that's out there. So Sevan is the founder, owner, creator, head honcho of a website called Astral Quest. If you haven't checked it out yet, you want to, as soon as possible. I've spent the last few hours checking it out. I signed up, I registered for it, downloaded his book, and, I think we have a lot to talk about. So, Sevan, welcome to the Far From Center podcast. Thank you for being here, brother.
Oh, Mr. Robert, it's definitely one of those things that I'm super excited about. Like, I got up today, and I love the early in the morning conversations, too, because you're fresh.
Yeah.
And obviously, we've gotten off to a really good powwow already just in our preliminary conversation. But, yeah, I'm here. I wanted to say thank you to everyone for having me on, especially on your side and all the family there, because I hear you guys function like a family, which is awesome.
Oh,
so
yeah.
We're over here. It's actually astralquest.com, which originally The Resistance. In fact, if you Google The Resistance, you'll actually find us on the first page. That's how strong we're rolling it. It's been going on for 6 years, but our resistance is about spiritual expansion and about being in the know. And so, that's what's up. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I like rabbit holes, right? So that's kind of I think my goal in life is to find rabbit holes and follow them down as far as they go. And astralquest.com is an enormous rabbit hole. I didn't even know where to begin. So can you walk me around a little, not walk me around, but give a brief explanation, because there is astralquest.com, which takes you to the resistance and you can sign up to be a member of the website. And there are so many things going on there.
Right.
I feel like I could spend the next 10 years of my life there.
Well, hopefully not. Like, I wouldn't want to tie anyone's up. We need too much of the time up in front of the computer. And that's what we do, because it's just a real time thing. So really what you're looking at Resistance 2010 is an archive of 4 years of going from a massive spiritual, very vivid awakening, encountering the other realm, and then trying to figure out after that what exactly occurred while the continuation of growth is taking place. And this not only was going on with me, obviously we're joining as we go, and there was tons of synchronicity as we went over 2012 and, all these different things, and beginning to analyze things from a much more deeper scope. So I would say personally with me, my endeavor was because I want to know what happens when you die.
Right.
And I was very aggressive at attempting to find that out. And that led into tons of things. And then obviously with the platform being developed, there's people who have other desires to know different things. And so we've just kind of taken the cream of what we really need to come into realization about now, like what's most important, what's relative. And then that's what you see there. So it's kind of in one way, if you jump right in and you're still a newbie, though, it may sound like hieroglyphics to you. If somebody's just talking hieroglyphics right at you. But if you stick with it, and you focus on rather than what you don't understand, what you can learn, focus on that, then you'll grow from it. Or you have the opportunity to go back kind of to the beginning, kind of grab a hold there when things are still kind of in the basic state of mind of how we perceive the world and how we perceive different forms of life, etc. And then just go through the progress of coming into the Great Awakening. And so now it's, like I said, it's real time. So what happens is that we've still been expanding. Like we're taking all this knowledge, because there's the largest esoteric library available on the internet for free, embedded within the site. And that's over at esotericlibrary.com, but you can link through the site or any of the avenues. Yep. But you have that knowledge base, and then you have all these images, which was my collection over 4 years of just going deeper into different books and penetrating spiritual knowledge and collecting stuff from there. And then so all of that stuff basically is access to any individual that signs up. It's absolutely free, because obviously how can you charge a person for freedom? If you're given the truth, you're given information, this stuff has its own current with it, so it's reciprocal. And that's what's up. So it's definitely, it's on and popping at the Resistance, and it's live, and it's about stuff that's going on right now. And we're moving into this, and it's a wild, wild interverse and universe.
So, and when we talk about this, you talk about real time. That's one of the things that really got me, is even when I was on the website, basically freaking out, trying to go, where do I go first? There's little pop-up boxes that come up. It is literally in real time, where there's other people. It's like IMC chat, where you have, your website, but you also have people that pop up with, hey, here's what I'm looking at, or here's what you can look at, or I can ask a question to any of the other, 30 to several hundred people that are on there at that very moment and ask questions in real time to other people that are searching for that same knowledge. So it's not just a vast expansion of random knowledge. It's right there. And if you have a question, I can go ask somebody in real time. It's amazing. It's great.
Exactly. It's like a beta version of a spiritual help desk. In fact, like we're going into
That's a great way to put it.
We're going into at the website Realm Dynamics, which is brand new, realmdynamics.com. I'm actually building in a professional real-time spiritual help desk that is manned by volunteers.
Wow.
People, we do it. We have a network that's all around the world, if you think about it. So someone's up. It's not always nighttime for everyone.
Right.
And they spend an hour, 2 hours on the computer. And obviously they need to be versed as far as the being in the know with the depth knowledge. But that individual volunteers their time for an hour, 2 hours. And then they're available as a spiritual help desk for a person who has a query. Because, there's questions on the quest, as we always say. And so a person sends in that query, and then someone that's adept bounces back at them immediately and says, okay, this is where you need to go. And what happens is that just putting all the stuff there, like all the information is kind of on the resistance and it's everywhere. Realm Dynamics is going to clean all of that up. But the reality is that just because it's there, it allows us to still send you a link. Or if you Google using Google as the Resistance 2010 search engine, you can go through, because that's still a deep archive. You're not going to ever really penetrate the bottom of it. I think there's there's 10,000, 12,000 people in the network and about, 5,000 blog posts. So each of them sometimes really long and written by myself. I think I wrote 1,200 blog posts within 1 year, just about deep knowledge, about what's going on in the matrix and exactly how to emancipate oneself from it. So, yeah.
So maybe that's a good place to start. We've already been talking for a half hour, but a good place to kind of jump back, I think, for some of the people that are here trying to kind of get a grasp of exactly what it is that we're talking about. So I downloaded it. You have a book that you wrote called The Code to the Matrix. I downloaded it. I was kind of perusing it before we talked. So what is the Matrix? What is the book? What is this? And it's free. It's free for anybody to go download. So go do it right now. There's nothing to stop you. But what is this? What are you trying to get across to people? What kind of information are you trying to put out into the universe with this?
Well, the Code of the Matrix itself is, it was written 5 years ago, so people have to keep that in mind. It's a very dualistic book, I will say that, because my anger at the gods because of confirming their complete identity was immense, because I was hurt in a deeper way. And this is from just my own spiritual dedication to things like Christianity and things like Islam, and then finally figuring out the authentication of who the deities were inside of that. So that great awakening for me, which was also energetic, had a great deal of experience connected to it. And one of those experiences were the dissecting of the language that we're speaking, the program per se in the matrix. Okay. And through English, I was intuitively showed by my oversoul, say that, how it's put together, how the words are backwards. Like, look at right there. The word says backwards, meaning the words are backwards. And that there's this whole thing going on with programming through the language and what letters and numbers really mean and what they really connect to. And that took me on an adventure. I will say that's still going on now, but it was really the basis to the Code of the Matrix. So I will point out not only just the involvement of different societies. And this before I heard guys like David Icke and Jordan Maxwell and Tassarian. All these guys I had a personal rule ever since I was younger to never read anything from the current time. Mm-hmm. Just because for some reason, I would think I was cocky like that in a certain sense. I'd be like, I need to read some old stuff. These people don't know what they're talking about. So I would go and plus the way I was raised, like I was raised in a spiritual household and we didn't have TV and we were homeschooled. And so there was a foundation there to where spiritual books were really my television, and my Marvel comics were the entities of the Bible and the Pseudepigrapha and the Apocrypha. So from that point, that's really the only difference, I would say. And that, of course, led me into the realization of the Matrix and exactly how it's, put together and how it runs. So just kind of
well, sorry, and that's also, reading your profile on astralquest.com, it talks a little bit about that being, language being one of your one of the biggest things that you do, kind of breaking down language and code within language. What got you into that? Like that, you don't just Wait, well, I guess some people do. Some people just wake up one day and look at something and go, "There's a code there, and I'm not gonna stop until I figure it out." Is that what happened with you? Did you just one day go,
Well,
"That's not the whole story"?
Well, no, well, it comes with the awakening, because where this code is actually placed is like if you put your hand in front of your face and something is written on your hand, you won't be able to read it. Mm-hmm. So that's the easiest way for me to explain where the code actually is. So it's right in front of you, so you kind of don't see it. It's inside in a certain sense. So if you're going somewhere to look for it, you'll never find it. And so what happens for me is that when I came into the first level of the awakening, or at this point, this was to me the second level of the awakening, when the language was laid bare in a certain tense, there was somewhat of a riddle going on in my mind. And it's interesting because you see that poetry and things like that connect a great deal to the spiritual world and tones and vibrations. But one of the things are the riddles. And there was this one riddle, and it said, "Yeah, James," which is my name. It said, "You like to play games, and you have too much weight." This is WEIGHT, so you'll wait, WAIT. You're trying to get light, LIGHT, but you need to get light, LITE. And but why that riddle was going, I was being showed that visually, and I think I spelled weight wrong earlier, but visually I was seeing that I had accumulated, because I had personally, I never had the financial problems and things in the world. Like, I was very just intelligent when I was younger. So even though I was in the hood and different things like that, I always maintained a different level of intelligence. So I didn't have financial problems. So I had accumulated a lot of weight. I started companies and got involved with other individuals, and I was just tied into this whole lifestyle, Porsches and all this different stuff. And I was a goner. But meanwhile, because of that childlike innocence inside of me, I was always seeking for the adventure. Like, my mind, body, and soul was always geared towards, well, I know there's something greater. I think we can fly. Versus, oh, yo, shawty, let's make some money, and then let's go from here to here to here to here during all the festivals and all the fights and all the games and all this, and just keep blowing money. You see what I mean? So right. I was like the fly of the wall, though, in many of those situations. So I had an opportunity to talk to and meet a lot of the influential individuals in this world, which I will be talking to again. And when I talk to them, I won't be talking to them as a person that they had just met. They'll be like, "Man, I remember you when we were..." And it's strange like that. Life obviously is a very strange existence, because your past is actually your future in a certain sense. Something already knows what you're yet to accomplish, so it takes you through what is more or less an occultation. So to bring this back full circle, what the language really is designed to do is it's designed to actually bring you into a level of realization. Somehow the creators of the English language, which are more of a Druidic Futhark language as far as its mother tongue, still, if you got the other half of the wheel, because English is 26 letters, so 26 plus 26 is 52 weeks in a year, that's one Anu. And that's the complete cabal, or the complete cable, is there's another half to our English language. And you'll find that most languages in this world, there's another half to them that are generally missing from the individuals who are speaking those languages. So in effect, they have half programs. And half programs don't turn like wheels. They turn like D's. And this is a little bit encryptic, but metaphorical. But if you sit down and think about it, a wheel is a circle. So if you cut a wheel in half, it becomes a D. Mm-hmm. The symbol of what we see is a D. Now you'll see why they're devil, demon, diablo, diabolical, all Deity. These different words that start with D and division. Right. The main deity, the main ones basically that rule on this plane in a certain tense, because it has a character that at a certain time is foreign to us when we become whole. And I'll just explain it that way, very simple. When the diabolical level of things becomes foreign to us when we step into being complete, and which is the only difference. And this is why, like I said in the beginning, the individualization is an impediment. Our wholeness is our power, because once we're collected into wholeness, then we have access to everything. So then that means that at one point we were in a state of everything, a big party. There was no separating. Never, when no one thought they were separated, it was just continuous, massive stuff going on, right? So the only thing that can exist when you separate from that then is negativity. This to me is the first part of AA, which is the symbol of the Illuminati. It's like admitting the problem that we are negative beings. Like, let's not get it twisted. Like, we know high vibrational frequency, and if we think that we're on it, then you have no clue what high vibratory frequency is. This makes you sober, because sometimes we think like haters in a sense. Every time we analyze something or think about someone, we only think about what they're not saying right and what they're not doing right and how they're not dressed, and we go into that. And so what this is about is it's a fact. It's something that when you separate, if you think you're individual, you become a neg.
But do you think
that's, once you
is that naturally human, or do you think that's a repercussion of the fall? Do you think that's something that we were innate with, or is that something that came to us from something that we did, or some other kind of outside extrinsic force that is inherently evil?
All of those. And this is why. And it has a lot to do with the pentagram. Mm-hmm. It has a lot to do with the oob, which is, or the corner, because this is one of the most important symbols in the dimension for a reason, because what the body is based on phi. Phi is the pentagram. And it's designed to, in a certain sense, trap or limit light for a moment. It is a governor. Okay. So the abilities that you have outside of the body, which you can kind of catch glimpses of in your dreams, mm-hmm. are much more expansive than what you generally experience inside of the body. And then on top of that, because this body is an actual pattern of not only this world, but this immediate universe, this means even planets at times can be created to be limitations. You're in a bubble. So this means everything outside of this you don't have access to till you get outside the bubble.
Well, if you look at the tree of life, that's what it is. The tree of life, if you look at the Kabbalistic tree of life, it is essentially, it is these different worlds with, in Kabbalah, each different world is represented by a different symbol, a different shape, a different planet. Each of these ones also have their own symbology on, Kundalini in the tree of life, and everything that you kind of follow once you, I think we're kind of hinting, once you, I guess, get through the looking glass, you start kind of pulling that curtain behind, it shows up, right. The same things show up in everything.
Right. You get the concentric spheres.
Yeah.
Because, there's the bubbles within the bubbles. And then when you go outside of bubbles, you find they're enveloped by other bubbles. Yeah. Like, I guess that also was the shame of the God in the Old Testament, because when proclaiming anything from inside of the matrix, you have to at once bear witness that you're inside of something. So basically, if you say, I'm God, I'm the only God, but you're inside of a matrix, it's like, that is one of the most idiotic things that can be done, because there's no only in that tense. You've already been eaten by something larger, if that makes a lot of sense.
That's a very good point.
And then we live again. Like, I heard one of your interviews, and the guy was talking about how we're eventually going to be eaten by the sun. And there's actually a Doctor Who episode. It's one of the most famous one, called Akhenaten. And that actually is featured in there, where the sun is actually going to come back and attempt to eat people. But somehow that during the whole episode, they end up being able to thwart the sun's ability to actually dissolve everything. But there's a deep level to what needs to be understood about the sun and what will survive. Mm-hmm. And this is because what we're dealing with here is that we're dealing with, when you go closer to what we think, or what we're calling the sun, you get closer to what's called truth. So falsehood then starts to melt away. So if your whole existence is built on falsehood, when you finally get to the soul, or the sun, or the soul, you will not be what you were before, because all that would have melted away. So this is like getting in front of a very bright light that's going to show you all your spots or imperfections or flaws, or basically ignorance in a certain sense, are impediments, and then burn them away. So this is happening, though, in our whole existence. Like, our whole existence right now, up until this point, per se, is about us getting into the higher state of perfection of ourselves in the groups that we generally function in, until we completely come together. But we do need to get the root story, though, the foundation somewhat, to what actually occurred here on this planet, especially with what happened with the moon. As we've talked about earlier, why you see the crescent moon and the pentagram as major symbols in this dimension, and also what is really going on with this new ancient alien story of the Nephilim, the jinn, the reptilian, etc. The alien, the extraterrestrial, etc. This same entity or entities that keep coming up or haunting us on the timeline. Because the reality is, I have kids, so I have a daughter, and so what happens is that if there's this thing haunting us, or every world we go to, it shows up, then we need to deal with it now,
Right.
especially since we have strength. Like, here's the thing that you learn, of course, even in any kind of service or any kind of a system of strength, is you figure out that if you're at your strength, it's then you need to deal with your greatest opponent.
Right.
So if our greatest opponent happens to be fear, then we need to be dealing with that in our prime, not when we're 70 years old and, oh my goodness, I'm about to die. What's going to happen to me? And then you get fed on, because obviously there's a whole lot of spiritual action going on here on the planet. That terror that you're in, which is obviously called depression, depress, meaning pushing down, depress to Zion, pushing down to Zion, right? So this kind of depression actually weakens the individual's integrity. So a lot of people want to know, well, what's going to happen when I die? And the answer is that your integrity, how tapped in you are to real soul force and the truth about what you really are, is going to determine everything that happens to you when divine dispersion, as it's called, begins to take place. That means when the elements act on you. Now, this is interesting, because if you understand it from just a scientific level, then it's when you are an etheric being, you are now subject to etheric forces, vapors, cosmic dust, if you may. Mm-hmm. And how it acts on you, meaning that your interaction and experience with it, are you foreign to it? Have you ever dealt with it before, etc., is going to determine your reincarnations. You will live on, but in what state will you live? And this is also what realm dynamics is about.
This is another thing, and I hate jumping in, because I feel like every single one of your points could go on forever, but I don't want to forget and miss out on any one of these things. But you're talking about, and it's crazy, because I've had conversations about these things in the past few days, and so they're really kind of striking a nerve, because I didn't get to ask these questions when I was in these other conversations. But you talk about these ethereal forces acting on people, and this is a big thing that has kind of been coming up lately. And I think it's more in the human perspective and kind of global knowledge now. But this idea of the color spectrum, right? And this part that we understand. Well, now we're starting to understand. Us as humans can't actually see all colors. We can't actually see everything going on, even within our own world. We can't even see things that animals can see. So do you think this is a part of it? This is a part of these ethereal things that are going on throughout our life? Do you think it's specifically important that there's 7 colors in our spectrum, right? That these 7 colors kind of play this part of our reality.
Well, that's the big thing, because there's actually 2 other colors. So there's a total of 9. And these 2 colors are really, especially when you think of occultism, they make up what occultism really exists with, because they're 2 opposite poles. And these 2 other colors are white and black.
Yin and yang.
Because once I cracked the code, what was showed was that the absence of color is clear, not white or black, as we know it. So what happens is you can throw white and black on the 2 opposite poles of the color spectrum. So they are, in a certain sense, bouncing through rhythmic tones back off of each other, like the 2 poles, like you said, yin and yang. And that's creating that 7, or that middle spheres of yellow, blue, green, and actually millions of colors, because of course, there's a million shades of gray and million shades of green, etc. So you get these different shades, which is just a unique individuality. So this is almost like infinite individualization. And this is why these kind of worlds, in the more numbers, higher Googleplexes and more senses, is actually the wrong direction. It's when you really turn on your abilities, you realize that what you're doing is you're collapsing all the chakras into the final chakra, and they close up like Russian dolls, right? And then you coalesce down into this point, and then you blink. Okay. It's not that you gain this 7th sense, 8th sense, 9th sense. No, what happens is the senses collapse. So what you call sight and hearing merge first. This is the first ability when you unlock the root chakra. The sight and the sound merge. So now you see. And this has a very unique ability for teleportation, because everything that is making a sound, it appears like a tube in front of you. And you can go down that tube like a teleportation and go to the other side of what is making that sound.
This sounds like the middle pillar to me, right? You know what the middle pillar, it's funny that I think we use the same terminology for a lot of different things, but we talk about the outside, the inside, the colors collapsing on light. collapsing all of your chakras.
We're talking about the
middle pillar.
Yes, the gap.
Yeah.
Exactly. The middle pillar is the activity that takes place in the middle of the gap of even what you see as a spark plug or an arc.
Right.
Like even if you're making colloidals, you see the arc is what's generating the unique ions of gold or whatever you're sparking in between that arc. And that gold is there and actually can be collected and brought back out as gold, which is, of course, a part of the alchemy. The alchemy leads to many different things, but the noble metals are one thing, but what was discovered from the plant matter, which is called spagyrics, is another. The actual essence of the plant, even the identification in a certain sense of what earth spirits really are. Like this knowledge and intent, and you can see if we don't know all this stuff, then something's going on because we're being extremely dumbed down.
Well, I think I think we do know, but that's the point is we are being dumbed down. People don't want us to know it. When you talk about the Matrix, there is somebody that, knowledge is power. That's the biggest thing that you learn in the military. Knowledge is power. He who holds the knowledge holds the power. If you can keep the rest of the people down, you essentially have an entire, human race of slaves. Like that's, as long as you keep them from that power that they know they themselves can become all powerful and take anything back that you could possibly hold from them. But having that essential knowledge there, having the ability to keep that away from us and make us stupid and care more about reality TV than actually all of these things that are going on around us that people knew thousands of years ago. And we've forgotten when we started watching TV.
For sure. So that means then we're under attack.
Yeah.
Like this is where I go to the next level with it, because like in my book, that means you're attacking me, but it's a spiritual war. Like you're using it's basically a silent war, right? So that's what I believe that we are equipped to actually deal with. And so it's like if you may, a spiritual armed forces, because we are being bombarded by beings that are not more advanced. Like I can give you during this episode the complete makeup of these entities, by the way. I can give you their origins, their dates. Shit, if we're on here long enough, I may even give you the calculation of their parallax, meaning that this was knowledge that it's here still in the world. But it's all encoded now because these individuals, the perpetrators, if you may, they have placed it into what's called the Babel, where the God comes down and confuses the language. That's one of the metaphors. Mm-hmm. When you think of the attack, think of the attack would come in the form of confusion to some sort to divide us against one another. And we find an actual write-up of something like that going on from the being that everyone is running around calling God. So again, this is to see not so much as us getting now into religion hating, but realistically, religions are stair steps. Like it's baby steps. It's nothing about the real thing of what you can do. It may try to lead you there, but it was not designed to get you there. The moment that something says that it is greater, then that means something else has to be lower. And from that point, we see that as the point of division. Like this is, it's like almost like common sense to a certain point. So what the world has been living in is living under dominion. And if we think about the words, then we get the first code is the king. Okay. Now the king, this word is Cain or the kin, meaning he's supposed to be a family member. Okay. But the Cain is a Cohen. Now, all these words that I'm saying are actually the same when you search them across different languages. Mm-hmm. But the Cohen is a priest, which is the Jewish term for a priest. So you're dealing with a priest king, more or less a sorcerer then. So when you go back and you look into the history in the Upanishads and you go into the Vedas and all this stuff, you'll find that there were individuals that utilized spiritual power to basically deceive people. And that knowledge alone was what people were aware of, and they constantly kept themselves on guard for that because it could come up anywhere. And how it was known to come up was with hatred and division. So hatred and division was already flagged as being a part of a real spiritual being that had that enmity, that hatred towards mankind within it. And so this is the deeper thing because now we are like the children's children of that kind of situation. And there's been blending going on. As I say, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men. This can mean any situation where some group that thinks they're elite looks at some group that is not supposed to be elite, but still wants to go and get some nookie.
Right.
and then
Nephilim,
kids
right?
are made.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that would be the Nephilim story.
Mhm.
But this Nephilim story, which actually connects to the rabbits, it actually connects to Venus. It actually connects to Amor, the serpents, the black dog, the pentagram, different types of symbolism, all from one planet. But it basically connects to that all wombs went into, not just what we call the woman's womb. It's the plants, the animals, the trees, the dolphins, the whales, many of these different beings when coming out in phi-based geometry, meaning that when incarnation takes place, and it takes place through the degrees of phi. Phi is the body, the bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll make it simple, very simple here. And this is something that out of all this conversation we're having, if somebody says, I didn't understand anything, just understand this. There are a group of beings here that are trying to convince everyone that they created us. Okay, this is the simple play that they're saying that they created us. And when we look throughout history and we look through the books and look through different things, we find that to be somehow ironically true to a certain degree. But for any individual that's real resonant and still resistant, something's not right. They're like, but I just don't believe. And that individual is true because they did not create the soul. Nothing did. It's an enigma, but they created the bodies. See, if you go into the Egyptian texts, the Kemetan texts in the books of the underworld, you'll realize that what they're doing with the geometries, the organic geometry, which are made out of curves, is they're creating the bodies, the traps in a certain tense that they light up and they attract soul force. So this is basically like a fisherman, but then the ocean is space. They set up a light trap that blinks. It's like a diamond and it's very illustrious. Then as a soul, you go into it. And this starts your incarnation. Incarnation. Now, car, if you just want to know who that is the root to the word carnivore. Car means flesh. So what we have here is and the car is also an anagram for ark, meaning that what holds the containers, the vessels. So you find the deeper text says we have made the vessels and the bodies. Now bring the souls. This is actually, there's texts that are showing the Egyptians using ether, which is what opiates are, to melt kas, meaning to melt the soul so that they can fit into certain vessels.
But so where does it originally come from? Where does that soul force come from? If we know who's creating the bodies, the harvester of souls, who's creating that actual place, that entrapment, where does the actual soul force come from?
Welcome to the realm of the unbegotten, my friend. The realm of limitless potential. See, if you realize that you're actually powering yourself on your own ideas, like if I say you won the lottery and you really think I'm telling the truth, you're going to have a lot of energy. So basically what you believe equals power. So what happens is that the soul is unbegotten. It doesn't have a beginning, thus it can't have an end. Now that blows our circuits. Because to us, everything comes from somewhere.
Right.
Right.
And I just had that. I just had this conversation today. We're the only people in the history of the universe or of our known time that believe time is linear rather than circular. Right. This is only a belief to us. We only think that, today has to be today and yesterday had to be yesterday and tomorrow has to be tomorrow. But most other people don't think like that or don't look at that. Or civilizations. Right. Sorry.
Because that's the byproduct of that's it. Because that's the byproduct of time.
Yep.
See, time is the weakener, right? Like that's why they show time as the Saturnalian, right? Mm-hmm. The lead, because it's the weakener. It's the radiation in a certain tense. But what happens is that look at all the words related to time. Minute, minute, meaning you're small. A week, W-E-E-K, W-E-A-K, meaning that you don't have strength. There's more words. It goes on and on and on and on. And so what happens is that, when you study the language, it shows you that, of course, and we were talking about this last night. I guess that's why we were talking about this last night, that if you like something, right? Let's say, for instance, this, red purse in 10 years now, let's think about how much you'll like that purse, right? Even less time. So this just shows us a simple principle that time causes everything that has luster or attraction to eventually decay. We don't like it anymore, right?
Yeah.
Even some of the things that are most significant, people need to wake up. Like even their children are like that now when they're babies and, oh man, it's the most amazing thing. And then as they grow up and they start getting 30, 40 years, like, ugh. Oh my goodness!
It's our own inherent
you acting
trap.
like the God.
I mean, everything about it.
Like the God of the Bible. I don't know why I created. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's Saturnalian. You see what I mean? Like, let's talk about the alchemy. Saturnalian is the element of lead. Lead is not affected by light. Lead is not a great conductor. So what happens is this is only saying that when you spend too much time in a matrix trapped below the speed of light, because remember, matrix is a vortex below the speed of light. That's why things are solid. So if you're in that kind of sphere, then you're like on a time clock anyway. That's why they say any angel, i.e. any powerful being on the surface of a planet becomes opaque after, they say, a day, meaning that you start losing your power the more you're in a physical plane attached to a physical reality. So yeah, man, I mean, just deep stuff, man. Take a break here for a second and just think about it. But it's intrinsic. But again, it's the adventure. It's the Astral Quest. There's nothing to fear. The more we come together, the stronger for sure that we are. We've now tapped into other things, though. That's what I want to designate a part of this conversation, especially towards the end, towards the solutions that we've discovered. Because now that we've united with the elements, like the noble kingdoms, like the minerals, more so than the animal spirits. So the minerals are always here as allies to help us. The ruthenium, the rhodium, the gold, the palladium, the platinum, all of this stuff in the proper stages actually increase our being and give us energy and current. And then this current or energy then turns into, as one of the small trickle down effects, is currency in our reality, money. Mm-hmm. But the money, people need to understand, moon energy is what it really is it's trying to replicate. It's trying to replicate fertility. The money in itself, because it's a talisman, if you're not the master of the images that are on that talisman, then they master you. And that's of course, that's how deep it is. Now, an ode to what one piece of paper can do. This is going to be a poem that we write when we get to the everlasting, brother. We're just going to sit down and write this. An ode to what one piece of paper can do. Now, on a magical level, talismans, I can't explain why. I have had a certain encounter with them. I'm not encouraging people to work with talismans, but I had an encounter with a piece of paper that proved to do some things that I still, well, personally, I do now know two-dimensional imprints do affect other planes. And if you do prescribe the proper symbolism during the right times, it seems to magnetize them, thus creating a portal. But that's so far off the concept of what we understand to be true. Most people can't even grasp this. But so let's just forget about the magical talismans from the Arabian Nights and the Persian rugs, etc. Let's just go to this money because this money is equipped so deeply with different tools that give it power. It doesn't just have power like some paper you go buy from Office Depot. It has power because it is made from trees that are aligned to human beings, meaning that the paper that is being used, which the papists were sure to put together in the papacy, that paper cutting of roots is the first level of the magic because they make this paper from. This is why every nation or tribe has a tree, has a bird, has a whatever, right? So they take all the trees of each tribe and they put it all in there to grind it all up. Second thing they do is they have to give it an aura. And people say, what is an aura? Aura is a magnetic field around you. You'll see it messing with computers these days and throwing things offline, right? So your aura has to be there to give something life. So where is the aura on a dollar bill? It's magnetic strip. Okay, so now that's enough. Where now do we get the two-dimensional imprint of the entity that we're trying to bring back? What do we need? We need the signature. Great. Here's the signature. Now, where also is the image of the individual we're trying to bring back? Here he is. He's dead, but we're bringing him back. He's a dead president. So the dead presidents, my friends, who are Masons, master Masons, Shriners, genies. Okay, if you really understand what they did over there. They live on in this money. And they affect every single thing a person is doing to one degree or another with the money. So this is also, when you're in the know about that, though, you understand how to plant it properly. Because what happened when they reached the subjective plane? And I want to make something very clear here, that there's the objective plane, which is this world, and the subjective plane, which is actually a space that where the soul force is. There are beings that know how to live in the subjective plane and in the objective plane simultaneously. And they've accomplished this by doing one thing, not being selfish. They giveth freely of themselves, knowing that everything that you create from them will be them. Let me explain that again. If you take this element called gold and you make this gold building, you may reside within it, but it belongs to gold in the frequency of gold, because gold, all it has to do is just lay there, make me something. And then it's like playing in a certain tense, like whatever you create from me, you'll think is yours, but it'll really be mine because you did it from me. So you see how it works on the subjective plane, that all subjective plane entities function as like money, currency, elements, things that you can take and then go make what you think is your own, but they have a share in it because it's made from them. And that's actually what money really is, if you think about it, because when you take it and you go and spend it somewhere, wherever you're spending it and putting it into, it only serves to continuously grow a specific system that doesn't really have our best interest in mind. Like, it actually is designed to keep us in continuous conflict because it will continue to divide us. Anytime the one who has the gold makes the rules, right? So who has all the gold? The Jesuits do. I mean, they have all the gold. They're the dark priests. They're the ones that went into all these different tribes, and especially the ones that came from the Indus Valley, Cambodia, Angkor Wat, the Netherworld people. And they went and took all of their totem animals and deities and put them in inverted pyramids, trapping their deities or their strength below the speed of light, so that those people end up becoming subservient to something that is already debased. Meaning that if we do have to fess up to our government, the level and frequency that they're actually on, because they're not talking about what we're talking about right now, if we put ourselves below that, we've been actually, in a certain sense, made into animals, sheeple, if you may. But on a real frequency level, we've been put underneath or pressed down. And this is done when you take one as your leader. So think about this.
So do you think that's Old Testament, all religious leaders? Do you think that's specifically the purpose of religion, is to enslave humanity?
Well, let me. I was getting right to it. Okay, right sorry. Here in the Old Testament. Well, it was right there. I mean, I'm glad you're on the way, because in the Old Testament, there is a time in which the people are encouraged not to take a leader. Like, there is no one that is higher than the other. There's a simple system of figuring out if something's right or wrong, and we call that intuition. We call that morals. Like, you kind of know when you're doing something right or wrong. There's no need for this one who is supposed to be the judge over everyone, right?
Right.
So what happens is that there's a heavy encouragement for people not to do this, but then they take to themselves, and these are all, again, metaphors. You got to think about it deeper. It keeps happening over and over again. It's mentally embedded, like Jung was talking about. They take upon themselves a king, and his name is Saul. Now, see, Saul is actually the root word to the word salt. Mm-hmm. Salt is known to be the covenant, or what is called the covenant, because it is in a cube if you look at salt underneath the microscope. So they say the covenant, which you still see the Jews practicing today, or the Jewish, those who are like Jews, they do the covenant of the salt because that is a symbol of Saturn, the king of kings, as they call him. Okay, so this means that what the people agreed to do was to put themselves under the dominion of what used to be a sun god. Notice how they say Saturn used to be a sun. Saturn used to be a sun. Saturn used to be worship. Saturn is still worshiped, is what they're saying. Mm-hmm. So they put themselves under this covenant of this king, trusting that this king would be honorable to them. But what happens in all of these systems is the king's children, just like what you see today. Saturn's sons, Sat-son, Brahman, Abraham, Sat, and Melchizedek, all of Sat's sons were like basically not living up to what the rulers originally said were what they were going to do. And this is what you see all the time. It's happening in our reality. They think that because they're closer, quote unquote, to the ruler that was elected through ignorance, then that they deserve the lion's share, because this is every bit of Orion, the lion's share of the of what are the prophets. of this planet, right? Now think about this. The prophets. What happened here, despite that that's synonymous with a person who brings forth a message from spiritual guidance, but it's also how you make money. The planet
Same
here,
thing.
you'll find
Same thing sometimes.
Right, exactly. Same thing. Same thing. No difference here. So look at the planet and then notice that there are cavernous regions bored throughout this entire planet. In fact, this planet looks like a honeycomb in the inside now. And this is because, and this was way before we got here, the extensive boring and mining of this planet already. Like most of its, we can just call it quote unquote spiced red clay, is gone. That's why people don't feel like they have a lot of energy and they're even up to the task, right?
Right.
But the other more minor elements like the gold and all that stuff was continuously mined. Okay. So what happens is that what we have inside of our planet is an advanced tunnel system that also served as a defense fortress for those same entities that I told you that suspected that they would have to defend this planet. And this is how they survived the last war. So let's get into finite
defend from
stuff.
us or defend from somebody else?
At this point, because we are actually mixed in, remember all is self. This is the highest maximum. Mm-hmm. So really we're fighting ourselves on this weird part of the timeline where we all think we're separate. So it's going to be hard to answer that question because you'll have people on this ship that are part Shemite, Hamite, and it's all in the same body now. Just like you have male and female in the same body now. So it's like you got dualities going on different levels, but resonant frequencies are creating the groups, meaning that what you resonate becomes your family. So you have the different factions that no matter what they're all come from the soul. So there's really no individualization. But so once they tap into one of these frequencies, they just go and polarize, as it's called. They polarize over there. Now, I'll also show you your government is very aware of this polarization thing that happens with people and they stay on certain levels. So when they want to move you from a certain level, what do? They sometimes send, or you get crazy and you go onto this pole that they need to get you out of. Who do they call? Police. But you may think, okay, well, hold on. That's just one example. Okay, Interpol.
Right. Well, I mean, who divides us more than our own? Who divides us more than our own politics and government? Right. I mean, they are the key of our division currently in humanity, in all of humanity. That is our division right there. I mean, that's their entire purpose. It seems.
This is unfortunate but true, brother, because it's a ballot. Now, ballot is Baalat, meaning Baal was the king then. He was Bel. He was Nimrod. He was Hadad. He was Allah. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. That same entity was, Jehovah was there too. Fuxi was there too. Like, it's the same energy. It's a frequency. That's why we're not dealing with people. We're dealing with energies, and this is why the spiritual world is cloaked, because it's the symbol of the division. This is how you find the actual the knowledge of this in symbols. Notice the division sign is a circle, a straight line, and a circle. Okay, so the circle then would be a soul, something that's complete. This straight line would be like a wall. And then the other side would be like another circle that's complete. And these two would be separated. And that would cause their division.
Us. Yeah. That's never, and that's, I consider myself pretty keen on symbolism, and I've never even thought of that. And
I went back to the basics, man. When you go into physics and you start looking at those symbols, you'll start seeing the alien language then.
Oh yeah.
But you will have to look at it from an individual who they're locked out. That's what compartmentalization does. The physicist can go and he knows more about this than me and you both, but he doesn't.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Well, it's like hidden in plain sight.
He doesn't see that. It's hidden in plain sight. Exactly, Mike. But those are the codes, because remember, build a better slave, not a superhuman, a super slave, Ubermensch. You see what I mean? So what happens is the slave must become more smarter, but still be under control. You see what I mean? Because a stupid slave, in a certain tense, can only build a stupid kingdom. So this is the new plot. That's why there was a fake loss of the war. Oh, we lost.
Right.
Then there was a deep infiltration. And then there was, good men were made to either give up their lives or get ready to bow down to a new level, a new order.
Well,
you see what I mean?
It's a funny quote I heard. What is it? You want a slave that's smart enough to work the machine, but not smart enough to ask why I even need this machine, right? That's that idea of like McDonald's. I need to make a hamburger. I put the patty down. That's it. I don't need to ask, what's the purpose of this all? That's not, sorry. Keep interjecting. I just had to throw that one out there.
Right. In a sense, I use it, but I don't know how to build it. You've seen the TED Talk where the guy tries to build an iron?
Yeah.
He shows that even something as simple as that, because at the end of the day, you still need the thing that actually tells the iron to shut off.
Right.
It's so hard to actually build that it's not something that we understand really. So where's our knowledge?
Right.
And so this is to me, even talking about this, because it's all fresh still to me. It's like the first day still. Right. So when I even talk about this right now, right, exactly. You've got to keep that fire alive.
Yep.
What happens is that when you see all of this, though, you realize that there's a perceived state of knowledge, a perceived knowing, and that's probably the danger of ego. I don't think ego is attached to what people are trying to attach it to these days all the time. I think it's just attached to when you feel like you're this individualized character, but this individualized character knows nothing.
Right.
And they instill that character more and more and more and more and more and make it feel powerful that it knows nothing. So what this is then is this just the individualization, making the person feel more and more unique by their own ignorance of that. When you're collected and when you're with people who really know what's going on and you're able to talk to them and transfer that information with them, you grow. Not when you get into the room with one of these individuals and you now are in an ego battle with who's the smartest. You see what I mean? Well, this is the madness. Like, that's why people don't have a master today. Now think about this also. When you understand that all is self and that actually you have a great deal of assistance, this means that there are energies and forces and vibrations that are here to assist you. And I'm not talking about just ascended masters and beings that can come and help you and aliens walking out of the wall. I'm talking about alchemy. I'm talking about this medicine, the real medicine, the organic. I'm talking about you can take a plant that has suffered just like me and you have in this environment. Because when you look at a tree now with the third eye open, you see it is so radiated and decayed. It has holes and it doesn't look like it looks when your third eye is closed.
Right.
This is an illusion because the condition that things are in, we don't really see it over time. It's like watching something age. You don't really watch the actual process because it's so slow. But if you do a time lapse, then you actually see how decayed it is. So when you look at a lot of the trees, they got holes in them. It looks like, they're just abused. But you can take that same tree and apply alchemy to it and put that tree. Alchemy is the right types of herbs, the elements and things that infused it back with its essence, and you'll see it come back to life. And then if you choose to take communion with it, meaning that you eat it, that's what that is, then you gain that energy. So do you see how also from what I just explained to you that can be seen as something malevolent? Well, meaning that if you go ahead.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, alchemy is one of the oldest sciences known to man. I mean, they've practiced it for thousands of years for us in a basic idea. And how many people today really understand it? I mean, so many people today look at these things that are actually the essence of nature and our life and our universe and our world around us, but they want to discount it because you don't need a calculator to figure it out, right? Or it's not done in a laboratory of the sense of like an MIT laboratory with, $1 million computers, because basic alchemy you can do either in the physical sense, in your own house, or in the spiritual sense, in your own temple, or whatever it is that you practice, whatever it is that you practice. Alchemy follows many different levels, and it's not just, it's not just turning things into gold, it's turning yourself, your spirit, your soul into gold. That's the real source of the game, right?
For sure. I mean, that's 100% the real source of it. And it's very interesting that you bring that up because it's like the alchemy, also in just understanding it makes its transformation. And that's what's written about it, is that the one of the more powerful things with the alchemy was not even the transmutation of the elements, but the transmutation of self that was occurring as you understood the elements.
Right.
And this is why our path back, because I did mention, there are certain things that are willing to be absorbed. Like there are certain things that basically, if you eat some gold or you eat some platinum or whatever in its monatomic state, it's going to pass back out of your body in a certain sense very rapidly. Mm-hmm. But if you eat something like, let's say, a tree or a plant, it's going to stay stuck within the body for more of a prolonged period of time, and it's going to affect you to a certain degree. Then, of course, you go deeper. Let's start with flesh. If you then eat the flesh, it's going to stay in the body and affect you longer. It's going to take longer to pass. So this is what was discovered about the real superhuman, not the super slave, is that there is a process that you can take yourself through a transition and of weaning yourself off of all dependencies. The human body is actually capable of living without air. And people would think that that's like a stretch, but let me show you the process. First, the person retracts from eating the meat. They generally go and be a junk food vegetarian at first because they realize that most of the proteins are within the plants and within soy and things like that anyway. So it's not a protein thing. It's just a terrain modification. If it's vegetarians that are weak, then why is this gorilla going to rip your arm off? And he's only eating treats.
Good
so
point.
the reality is that it's a hoax. It's all a part of the karmic karma shit that they got us into on this planet with eating things and consuming things consistently to satiate ourselves, which makes us more dense. It basically quenches our ever burning fire to do such things. So anyway, the transition is first from the meats into something that, again, junk food vegetarian. We'll take it from the steps. Then the vegetarian starts kind of cleaning up his stuff a little bit, starts to realize he can boil off some of the fat and different things, and then he starts going into just a general vegetarian. Then from that point, the person may decide to make a translation into vegan. Me personally, I'm at a different transitionary point personally myself, so I've stayed with the vegetarian because I'm working in other areas. Mm-hmm. So what happens is, though, is if one goes into the vegan, then they actually start getting themselves to the point where they can begin to wean themselves off of food entirely, but they need some kind of source of fuel. That source of fuel is actually minerals. Real monatomics do have the ability to actually sustain the body like a food, because if you think about it, a potato has, let's say, 1 millivolt of energy. If we take it into the laboratory, one particle of a super deformed nuclear hybrid contains about 1,000. So you tell me which is more powerful, this small particle within this even less than a drop, or this huge potato on the counter. But that's when it's the mind game now. That's where the codes start coming in, the firmware that tends to lock people out of just common sense. Common sense will be like, the person says, well, shoot, when I eat this potato, I feel full. But when I eat this drop, I don't feel full and I need to eat.
Right.
This is then the beginning of the quest, because now it's a battle in a certain tense against the way you've been, in a certain tense, been trained. And that's why if you go into the organizations like CIA, et cetera, they can go extended periods of time with no food, denying their body, denying not feeling pain, et cetera, because it's mind over matter and you're trained to do that. So imagine the height of that then, because that's what we're still talking about. We're not talking about something, and I'm not saying to people, you got to do this or else. I'm just telling you, this is to run the gauntlet, this is what happens. So then once one can actually go from minerals and cut off minerals and go to straight water, but this is not just regular water. Generally, this water is infused with solar light. This water is either the structure is completely broken down, which is done through distillation, and then built back up, which is done through magnetics. You can do this with your mind, but there are also other tools that can help you do it. Because remember, any of these stages you can do simultaneous to what you're doing now, even if you're still eating meat. If you're still eating meat, monatomics will obviously start to move you into not wanting to eat meat very rapidly, because it works more on the entire consciousness of the individual. It gives you the strength that is necessary to overcome certain things. So then as we keep going, we now have erased metals. We're now in the water. And guess what? Water starts to dissipate when you understand how to utilize prana. That's why the best things in life are free. The air is still free. It's just the quality of the air that you're breathing. So what happens is if you can get in certain areas and get to certain heights in the elevation, the air is so rich with pranic or life force, you can sustain yourself for a prolonged period of time on this stuff. And this is why the Himalayan mountains and the Tibetans, et cetera, became some of the longest existing people on the planet, because they didn't subject themselves to the elements.
We have a lot of Tibetan friends in my family. My wife is Buddhist, and we still have a lot of friends that are Geshe-las, and we met the Dalai Lama a few times. We still have a lot of friends that are in that area and from that area. It's funny because you talk about the different diets, and there are actually a lot of different esoteric cultures and beliefs and ideologies that follow this idea that when you're going into certain practices, you can only eat certain things because it gives you certain vibration. It kind of puts your body in a certain state, and there's so like the Dalai Lama, our friend the Geshe-la, all these other guys, before they're going to do serious, like different types of meditation, they can't have garlic, they can't have meat, they can't have onions or anything else like this. What is it? We were with the Dalai Lama 2 years ago in Washington, D.C. for, I can't remember what it is, but it's a 7-day prayer for all of humanity, basically. And so when they're doing that, none of our friends or His Holiness the Dalai Lama, none of them could eat, same thing. Nothing really stinky. So garlic, onions, anything tasteful like that. No meat, no nothing. They had a very bland diet and basically water. That was it. But
right.
There's one more point here, and there's one thing that I want to ask you if you've ever heard of. If you haven't, we can just blow it off here. But you talk about monatomic, you talk about water, and we talk about gold, and we talk about vibrational frequencies. So there was one you call it conspiracy theory, whatever you could want to call it, that basically we talk about super slaves, that the first race of super slaves that we know of were the Sumerians. The Sumerians were built specifically put here on Earth to harvest monatomic gold for another species. Have you ever heard that? Has that ever come into?
Sure.
I see. I've heard it here and there, but I don't really know if there's any truth to it or not.
For sure. I mean, first of all, we need to clean up kind of a lot of this stuff because, there's been mixing in with several different stories. But just to take monatomics on its own, what I would say, because we've actually started dealing with monatomics, but totally different than the monatomics that you're looking at on the internet, which is actually really coming from one source. And those dry monatomics are very dangerous to the system because they're highly acidic. And they're actually not monatomics, they're biatomics because of the stage that they're in. So I'll just say that, and just understand that I do deal with these elements in a real life setting. So I can tell you the difference. But the Sumerians were not mining for gold for monatomics. First of all, the gold to the Sumerian was synonymous for souls. Okay. And for them, when they landed in summer, they immediately went to Kush, which is Abyssinia. Abyssinia is known as, in a sense, the abyss, because it is basically it is the geographical point of the netherworld. So Egypt, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, was known as the place of transition for most of the species on this planet, meaning that when you would die, you would follow the ley lines, which are like paths cut out in a forest.
And they connect Angkor Wat, the pyramids at Giza. They basically connect all the major religious sites of our history. Yeah.
Right, in which I call the reincarnation stations. That's the easiest way to put it, because what you're dealing with is generally the mother or the father of the individual will take them into one of the temples, consecrate them to the god for life, which is still done today. And then when the person reincarnates, they will travel back to that temple, which is on a ley line, and then do the reincarnation process with another that is familiar with the covenant, meaning another family that is involved in that same temple. So this was how that continuous, and you get groups of people that are soul groups, in a sense, following each other around lifetime after lifetime after lifetime because of these kinds of oaths and pacts that are, because think about it, an oath or a pact is a fasci or a binding to put things together. So what happens is that this whole grouping thing that's still not connected to wholeness is very much going on. So you have different kingdoms in a certain sense. You got the kingdoms of the immortal Charlemagne. You got the Boudic plains. You have the Dominion, which is between the earth, the surface of the earth and the moon. You have the inner world, which is obviously has a lot to do with the inner earth and the inner sun. So there's basically there's lots of stuff going on. So it's kind of like they kind of roll it all in. And that's why I kind of shake my head a little bit at the ancient alien stuff, because it's all kind of steered to finally lead everyone into the Nephilim or your creators.
Yeah, well, and they only have an hour. Yeah, they have 1 hour plus commercials, so they kind of get it in there.
Right, and they still have to, at the same time, keep most people, because I also see these programs as like bridges. They have to keep people at least entertained to some degree to the cohesiveness, because obviously if we threw this program on in place of that, it probably lose at least 80% of its viewers just in the non-cohesion of what we're actually talking about. Right,
well, because you can't get to a level that's too deep. Of course, you get to a certain level of deep, and they're not going to put it on the air.
Exactly. Well, it depends, because what they want to do and what they have to do becomes two different things when they're dealing with the Time Lord.
Right.
Meaning that when you come into your stage of full consciousness, there's nothing they can do because you can bend their mind. Like it's really been a scenario where the human being is feared. Like, because the human being, it was in a tense for whatever even designed that is like a weapon because the way that our fingers bend, the way that we can think, all of these kinds of things, when collaborated all into one entity, especially if you can imagine what you are as a spirit, it's like a very, very dangerous weapon or a fear for many individuals or many different kinds of beings. So it's just, we have to have the proper training, or else our children do become our enemies. If you think about it, like, we can not give the right training to our children and totally face them in the political power and making the decisions for our grandma and grandpa. You see what I mean? It's all happening like that. So that's why it's easier to adapt the concept of all this self, because you start working with solutions for everyone, even Illuminati's, like whoever it is, it doesn't matter. Jump into the frequency and get ready to bathe yourself in pure light. Like, and this is not light with a color, it's clear, or at least full spectrum light. Let's start working on that. And so it's about individuals who are ready to come at this, not with taking up the old concepts and dogmas of the past, so that way it has all this residual energy that still affects people, you know, to one degree or another based on what their experience was with that. Because remember, all these symbols mean totally different things now based on interpreters. So someone can actually hijack a symbol. Like, you could take a Star of David, which was originally a Sri Yantra, or you could take a Sri Yantra and then, or even it has different names, and you could make it into a Star of David. And now the Star of David is Jewish in a certain tense.
Or even a pentagram that was, and if you even look back, a little bit further than 100 years in our own past, the pentagram was a normal part of religion, but now it's kind of taken on this satanic anti-establishment symbolism, where that's not its true roots. That's not where it really came from. Now it's only been given this connotation.
It has so many uses. And right. For our limited state of mind, what we call evil can indeed come from the pentagram if that's what it's utilized to do. Because remember, it's actually a symbol of the creations here on this planet. So obviously we have individuals that are beautiful beings doing magnificent things, and then we have complete destroyers. Right. So what I feel like is that a lot of this stuff, and probably most of it, is really passive. And then when it gets to us, it's like a piece of steel in the living room. To you, if it's just a block of steel, it may just be like, at best, a piece of art. But to a craftsman, it can become a lamp. It could become all sorts of different things. So this is what happens with many of these symbols, is that they have different levels of use. And if they start being misused because of their potency, then it can definitely become an issue. And so that's what we're dealing with. I think the human being also is being misused. You have the same kind of malevolent forces manipulating the intelligent minds now, and then making them callous, or doing the alchemy on them, basically giving them certain weights and measures of certain things, operating in the mist. And because it's important for people to realize that there is a spiritual plane. There's actually a world that is very close to this one. And there's multiple worlds, but the one that's very close to this one is the most important in a certain sense, because on a time level, it's what affects this world. So you can actually move into a space in the ancients used to call it dream time. You can move into a space that you can actually control what you do here tomorrow. And you can see what's going to happen here tomorrow. It's like the back room. And I want to give you this key too about what's going on with Venus, because it's a very important thing. Because when you speak of symbols like the rabbit and the rabbit hole, even the Playboy bunny, and the fertility that's associated with Venus, especially in conjunction with the moon, you get actually the story of the arrival of many of what became the malevolent forces. Now, there's always an argument to whether or not the original ones had so much malevolent intent, or it was just their sons. And this is in all cultures, because even in the Bible, if Noah's there telling Shem, Ham, and Japheth, oh, don't you guys go to war, because then you're going to bring back those evil spirits, and then it's going to be crazy again, and the world's going to be flooded. What was he saying in a metaphor? What he was saying was, look, if you guys go into it, then you'll use your intelligence to find the super weapon known as Adam, and you will split Adam, meaning you will divide him. Then he will be destruction to all of you. This is on different levels, if you think about what I'm saying. Right. So now the nuclear weapons, etc., instead of using those for power, harness energy, going above the speed of light, etc., which it has the ability to do, we use it to blow it up and blow up each other with it, right? Yeah. So then this is what then occurs. What they did last time, and here's a deep secret that most of these New Agers and all these different people who've never really experienced the spiritual world but so fervently talk about it, miss, and that's what happened with the Atlantean Lemurians. And when the Lemurians fired on the Atlanteans that had already set up a base on the moon to drop bombs on the Lemurians, these two just like what the world is trying to go into now. But you see, they're being slowed up. Something is working in humanity's favor. When they got to the moon, they set up bases so that they can drop bombs from the moon, because then you escape the whole problem with gravity and projection.
Right.
You see the problem? They couldn't build bigger missiles because when you go from with gravity, you need a lot of fuel to fly to the other side of the planet. But if you drop it from the moon where there's no gravity, shoot, you just need to wait till it spins and then bloop. So the Atlanteans have set their base up on the moon, bombing the Lemurians. So the Lemurians hit the moon. These two idiots, in a certain tense, polarized left brain, right brain, going to war on the planet with none other than themselves, and divided in factions. Once hitting the moon, did exactly what you would know to happen if you shot something at the moon, seeing how much it controls the gravitational pull of the Earth. So what occurs after you blow up the moon or shoot the moon till it looks like a crater?
You destroy yourself.
You throw off the gravity of Earth.
Yep.
So now everyone's fleeing, trying to get into the caves and the tunnels, and even the scientists, as they say, which were really magicians, sorcerers, etc., didn't even know what to do about what they had done, because there's no right side to jump on. You see what I mean? When you now done it, it's like, okay, now you've really done it. You've hurt the baby. Now look at us. Now we're in caves now. And then during a lot of knowledge that says why we were going back and forth with each other, there was an invisible force. And I think this is like the scapegoat. And that's why it's always become even the scapegoat to this day. And even under the goat symbolism, which is the inverted pentagram, was kind of encouraging us to fight each other and to do this to each other. You see what I mean? So what they're talking about on a deep level is that in Arabic it says, "Udu billahi min al-shaytan regime," meaning Allah protect me from the whispers of shaitan. So I'm not telling you I believe in Allah, but I'm telling you that they're holding some authenticated part of the story where there are entities that talk to you in your mind. That's what they call the whisper. It's too deep. It's too low for another person to hear it, but you can hear it. And this comes in your mind like, man, I can't stand them. You see, these people, they're never going to do right. Man, you just need to do what you need to do. And there's this consistent thoughts in your mind. And they talk about this. These are thoughts against your own will. Because all your thoughts will manifest into something, right? Like if you think I'm going to go to the store today, you're probably going to go to the store. So all of your thoughts will manifest into something. So if you have all these thoughts that are not your own will, this means that you actually are continuously manifesting a reality that is not in your own will. And that is the secret.
And if somebody's goal at the end of the day is to enslave us, what's the best way to enslave a population is to divide a population. Because if all of humanity came together on one, we could not be divided, right? So that's the best thing. If you can cause me to fight my brother, then I won't band together with my brother. I'll be fighting my brother rather than banding together with him against a common enemy who is truly trying to enslave me. I'll have my entire attention diverted to my brother, right? And that's the goal. If you really want to enslave somebody. And that's another important thing. I've taken it to studying a lot of religion. It sounds like you definitely have a lot of wisdom and a lot of studies in the various religions of the world. And that's one of my big ideas. I'm working on learning Hebrew so I can read the Torah and the Old Testament. But looking at the Bible and knowing what I know, just very small things about numerology and holy numbers, and a lot of friends that I've spoken with about esoteric versus exoteric, they're basically being a hidden story even within the Bible. It seems to me kind of like they wrote the Bible, but they wrote it, even I watched this entire video of this guy that was saying he deciphered the first line of the Torah, which is the first line of the Old Testament, which is the first line of even our Old Testament, is basically nothing more than a cipher to read the rest of it and to decode everything else, to understand everything else. It seems like it's just part of my belief that religion was made to enslave us, and they're actually taunting us by writing this code even within our own religious books. But it's like a taunt, like, I bet you won't be smart enough to figure it out.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is because the biggest story in the Bible takes place in the book of Numbers.
Right.
And it's encoded because in Hebrew, imagine, in Hebrew, the letters are numbers, obviously. Mm-hmm. So this means if you're reading it in Hebrew, you're not reading letters, you're reading numbers. So basically you're reading a mathematic code.
Yeah.
Now the same thing with Muhammad. His miracle was that he had a Quran that was throughout numerically equivalent to the number 19, which even a sleeper computer couldn't do. So they say. So what happens is that what you're then dealing with is something that is using an advanced level of intelligence, but really a skip code that actually, as long as everyone is debased not to see that this is going on or made to forget that this even happened, then it seems intelligent. But to anyone else, it looks like foolishness. Like if something is not clear to extraterrestrial or any other kind of advanced being, it looks like foolishness. So any kinds of encryptions and codes we're basically then encouraged to make sense out of something that has no sense. And this is what I call like the left side of the brain has no real, it's not logic. It's not based on anything. Why it's doing what it's doing, there's no explanation for it. So if someone tries to come and explain why, this is going to serve to drive that individual crazy, because they're going to actually now try to make something that is not correct a reason for it being correct. You see what I mean? So this is the back and forth volley. And we talked about just recently, especially getting deep on the left and right hemisphere of the body, and especially the brain, how there's the corpus callosum. And if you go into the deeper text, you find that the corpus callosum is what is called the rainbow bridge. It's what's called the Bifrost by the Nords. It's the area of the brain that, if you were trying to be in the command center or centered, basically the center, you have to be balanced. You have to operate from the middle part of your brain. So where most people are, as far as their consciousness, is generally below the waist in the gonads. That's where, like, because if you think of the energy of the body, it has a focal point. So the focal point of the energy of most people is in the gonads, which is below the waist. So the waist is also symbolic for Midgard, and below the waist is the netherworld. This is in all charts and diagrams you see in the Eastern traditions, especially below the waist is the netherworld. So where most people are is right below the netherworld. It's there in that genital area, right? And who is the god of the netherworld? Is the one of the waist. The one in the waist is known as Satan. He's the one that wears the belt. He's the one that wears the garter. He has the ring in a certain tense. He's the lord of the cabal, or the language, or the cable. Because remember, the cabal or cable means that it connects. So the first letter of any language connects to the last letter of the language, thus making a cable, A to Z. So the lords of the rings have languages, or MEs, which you remember the Sumerians, they were all about the MEs. They have the languages that are necessary to create the realities. So this is what you would call God knowledge. Then the MEs are basically entire ecosystems, but not seeds of just the animals in the DNA, not like Noah in the ark with 2 by 2 of the DNA, but actually the words, the tones, the vibrations, which basically, when pronounced by an individual who has an activated system, they can bring forth the life. See, the reason why our division doesn't help us is because when we are together, when we say we're going to do something, it gets done. Right. Because all of our collective energy is being used to make it happen on whether it's the physical level in building something or the spiritual level in spiritual conception, right? So then what happens though is if we're divided, then we become small versions of that. So now we live in a reality, and obviously we're under a new program with them making us use our minuscule power at this point, because of division, to manifest little baby microcosmic stuff. They call it the blueprint. That's the code word for it, especially in masonry. You just manifest these little bitty wheels, and all they do is they turn with inside the bigger wheel, because the bigger wheel, who's also known as the king, he's the one that when you're accepted, this is an ancient and accepted Freemason, an accepted Mason versus a regular Freemason is under allegiance to the king. Right? So this is who controls the land, but this king that we have is not our kin. He is not our family, because nobody that is our family would treat us like this. So when you, again, trace back these beings, you get to really knowledge falling into the hands of degenerated sons. Because as you go into through reincarnation to reincarnation, and you get this spite, you get this jealousy, you get this hatred, and then you keep going with it, you're gaining more senses. People don't realize hatred is a sense. Envy is a sense too, just like love is a sense. So when you gain these negative senses, you start to basically make up and comprise this negative spirit that keeps incarnating over and over again and adding to that. So what happens then is that we come to a point where we say enough is enough, that now we either activate or else. Like, this is what it is to me. So, and this is what gets us on the onset of figuring out the story. The story is on Venus had an ejection, meaning that there was an entity, and later on became a group of entity because it had more children. It was androgynous, meaning that it had the ability to procreate within itself. A being known as Amor. which makes up now who Jesus is. It makes up who a lot of what they call messiahs after they got the whole messiah-based program, chosen one-based program. Amor meant black, the blackberry, the black one, the Kim, right? Because Kim means black, right? So Kim comes from Venus, every bit of Venusian. This is where Europe gets its name from Yoruba. Yoruba is voodoo. That's the new guttural term that's given towards an entire pantheon of entities that hail from another planet that basically the original ones seem to be in some kind of conflict with the pentagram shaped beings. While their children, the sons of the gods, when they can get themselves as gods, the Venusians get themselves as serpent gods in people's mind. Their sons was like, man, but Shorty looks good. Like, we're going to go down there and we're going to go reincarnate because this is our kingship. So we can go down there and reincarnate. This is when the demigods, the ones that you can read a little bit of this in Morning Sky's book work, but he kind of jobbles it up in a weird, strange way. So this is the official story. Do you have entities coming from an entirely different constellation and incarnating on the earth and taking up kingship? So they show that in the ancient times, the reason why everyone's got the serpent everywhere is that the king wanted himself to be worshipped under that symbol because it struck terror in people because of its poisonous. It had not so much as everything to do with what we call the snake and the snake's DNA and genes, but every much to do with characteristics and traits and zoomorphication. Zoomorphication is if I show you I'm a snake, bird, lion, that means that I've went through different levels of the cabal. And I have different levels of power that I've gained through those missions. And if I'm balanced, then you're dealing with a very, very magnificent being. But if I'm off balance, you're dealing with a very, very malevolent force.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is what happened. I mean, go ahead.
Well, so, okay. Well, we've talked about so many different things. We broached on one thing a little bit earlier, and this really piqued my interest because Adam Karmamam, which is basically this kind of it's the ancient anatomical picture of man, and I actually saw it on your website. I was looking at it earlier, and I saw the same anatomical map that a buddy of mine showed me several months ago, and is working on actually deciphering the entire thing. But it goes into Kundalini, and it goes into this anatomical representation of man. And we get into the serpent now. I know there's a representation here where you're talking about the gonads and the serpent and all these other things. How do you see these all connected?
Well, because the cadmium is the tree. And then what the serpent is, well, Adam Cadman is also called the androgen. So if you saw this on symbolism, this would be a pentagram united with what you call a hexagram, which you see in the Washington streets. So that would be the symbolic representation of the Cadman. So this is basically an androgynous being that can birth worlds from within itself on a higher level. And then on a lower level, I mean, it gets into all sorts of different levels of perversion if the person is taking only the basic levels of the understanding. But what it is it was a world that was created. And there's a lot of, and we're in it, by the way, but there's a lot of speculation about, was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? And I can't even get into it anymore. I could just only go from directly what you're dealing with, which is basically a world that was created based on the agreements of certain beings that called themselves in harmony, which is why they did the pact on the Mount of Harmon with each other. And they swore that they were going to do the deed. And that's how it's mentioned. And I can only imagine that deed meant sex. Now, sex is 6. Okay, it's right there in front of us. Sex is 6. So sex is the generation of energy through dualistic poles. That's basically what it is, to create friction. And thus, when the friction is created at a certain point, light disperses some type of life form. Okay. So this is the same thing when you see a man and woman come together. They create this energy between each other from rubbing back and forth. And the guy obviously is excited. The girl's excited. What this looks like on the astral plane is a light, but these two lights are combined. So they have the ability to attract souls. You see what I mean? So think about what I'm telling you. I'm reverse engineering reincarnation. Mother and father get together and they have their own type of alchemy. Mom's from certain place, dad's from some place. But when they come together, it equals this certain kind of light. Then that light attracts a being that says, that's the experience that I want. I want all of that together. So boom, the being goes into the lifestyle with two parents that between the two of them, they can actually teach the child everything that the child saw in that light that from the parents. But if the parents split up, which generally happens more often than not, or even if they're together, they're kind of split up because of the matrix reality and the programming. You know what I mean? Dad's kind of looking at the girls and mom's still dreaming that something else is better. So what happens is that there's basically a false incarnation. So the only thing that is really wrong is that we're not taking care of the children. Mm-hmm. They're not being raised the proper way. And so what happens then is that we are guaranteeing ourselves inevitable cutoff. See, because how this was designed, if you want to understand what the deeper knowledge from the Sumerians, Egyptians, Kemetans, and all this, the ones that were working on the positive level for humanity, they were creating a way that we can infinitely exist with our physical creations, which were different things that we designed and stuff like that. This was like the design room. This was like the art room in a certain sense, a preserve. You see what I mean? So what happens with incarnation is that now then the first beings, when they quote unquote die, which means to divide, meaning the spirit is splitting from the body. When they died, they would just go into their children. You see what I mean? There wasn't no, oh, mom's on the other side and I'm over here. And maybe when I leave here, I'll talk to her again. Are you serious? Mom popped up in your mind after that in a certain tense. And you then formed a collective thought with them. And that's what the ancestors really were. That's why the bloodlines, as they keep calling it, were so important. It's because there was a resonant or biorhythmic connection with everyone that had, quote unquote, died. And they lived inside of you and gave you advice, for better or for worse. And this is what we call now, because this is still going on, ideas in our minds. Now, remember I told you earlier about these spirits that talk to lower, and they talk to the point where they're like thoughts in your mind. Right. This is the ancestral biorhythmic connection that you have. And that's why they say, oh, well, there's benevolent and malevolent forces. And the reason why that is so is because anything that is divided from all there is there's going to be some opposite pole going on. And this even exists within nature. You got butterflies and you got wolves. So what is the difference between the two? It's obvious. You got certain creatures that carry poison, like snakes and spiders, while you have koala bears or sloths. So what you see is that there's this spectrum, and it just exists. Some people get crazy with you if they think they've reached this level of enlightenment, and then imagining that if they take off into one of these areas or frequencies where there's things that are diametrically opposed to them, that they will just walk through it without any kind of taint. You have to actually get yourself on that level. That's why it says you have to make a sober estimate of yourself every day, so that you don't imagine that you're more than you really are, so that you can become. Because if somebody says, hey man, do you know magnetism, everything about magnetism? And I say, yeah, man, because I'm on my ego trip and I'm like, he thinks he knows more than me. Right. Yeah, I know about magnetism. Now, who have I benefited? I haven't hurt that guy because I just saved him time. So he doesn't have to even explain it. But I hurt myself because I'm not learning it. So this is like the big thing, is that we have to come into this and start saying, okay, I don't really know what I'm dealing with here with these forces, because these forces have been traced for so long. There used to be dictionaries, encyclopedias about the different kinds of spirits. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it was known that, first of all, the larger spirits, when they incarnated here, they incarnated in larger fleshly life forms, because the flesh, they couldn't be contained within what we call a human body right now. So you have then a dinosaur, meaning that, do you think a dinosaur doesn't have a soul? What have we learned here? Anything? So how big is the soul in a dinosaur then? Pretty big. So how many souls do you think? How many dinosaur souls can we really make? And this is the Egyptian Kemetan conversation. How many different Phi men do you think we can make out of one reptilian? One reptilian giant soul. Right. Oh, probably about, I don't know, an infinite amount if we put them into the hypercube. This is a Kemetan conversation. What is the hypercube? The hypercube is the adjacent dimension to us. It is the cube you see on Hellraiser. It is Enochian. Mm-hmm. It is basically the ability to pull things out of fourth dimension into third dimension. So how does this hypercube work? You can see a visual explanation of it by taking mirrors, like tiled mirrors, and facing them all into each other, cutting a hole into the corner, and then putting a light on the top, and then looking inside. There's a guy that did it on Facebook, YouTube. We got a video up on the site. When you look into this thing, you see infinite points of light. And if you have a strong enough light, you'll notice those lights coalesce in the points of the hypercube. So what does all this mean? Give it to me in regular knowledge. Give it to me in layman's terms. It means that light gets trapped in corners. Now remember, Ub, or the pentagram, means a corner, according to the Sumerians. So when soul or light shines into a corner, it becomes collected into, it makes a sphere, i.e. a world. So this is the knowledge of the Enochian Metatron. Then these are Time Lords. This is the calculation of the parallaxes of Orion, the intersecting triangles or the time, the what's called the hourglass, right? This is where you have these infinite worlds that basically what you've done now is there are more yous. These other yous, sometimes you see them in the dream, are just as much as aware that there's another you as you are right now. So this also means that when you become awake here, you awake in all other simultaneous realms, and then you collect yourself at that point. Like immediately, all of this, some people call this awakening, Kundalini awakening.
String
all
theory.
Of the points of light.
I mean,
Exactly.
even physicists are talking about this idea now, string theory. Yeah.
Exactly. So all those strings are all pulled together. And then the individual actually they awake. And this, my friend, is something that is real. Like I come to tell you that this is something that I was able to accomplish 6 years ago from certain procedures, but more of a life of just continuously chiseling at the wall. Like, what's really going on here? How do we really exist? Et cetera. And then finally breaking through. But the only reason, though, is to come and explain it as eloquently as possible, or the best that I can, to individuals. Why? Because what I told you before, it doesn't seem to be as magnificent without everyone there.
Right.
It's the strangest thing. Once I reached it, I could not contain it. And then there was something like a laugh, and it says, there's more than you can actually take. I know you haven't heard that before. Like you think that there's a limitation, and it's like you in there trying to eat everything. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And then you're like, and then they're just laughing because they're like, yeah, everyone kind of does that at first. But trust me, it's not there's going to be no scarcity here. All of what you experience. And my heart goes out to people because I know where they're at. Like they're in a husk, my friend. If you pull out of this realm and then you look back into physicality, which is quite difficult, what you'll see around a person is a shell. That's why Phi connects to shells. And that's why you see Venus emerging from the shell. Okay. So that shell is these infinite lifetimes, like a tree. They build up around you. And then they can either serve to make you wiser and protect you, or they can serve to actually enchain you and imprison you. So in the deeper knowledge, they say on the island of Cirque, which of course is the Jesuit, the Catholic Church, she's the one that has all the wild beasts sleep on her front porch of her church, which is the same word. That was the island that Orion died. That's what it says in the ancient text from that particular dogma. But what they're telling you is that this particular geometry that we're in, the destruction of those species started taking place here on this same planet that we're on now, because Cirque, who is an enchantress to a certain degree, or an enchanter, depending upon what face it needs to take. That's why it's called Janus. It's two-faced. He'll be white, he'll be black, he'll be green. That's Osiris. It'll be a male, it'll be a female, it'll be anything you want it to be, as long as it can accomplish one thing: divide you. And that's why I'm not a big fan of these anti-serpent things either. Right. Because according to what I've studied in our genetics, we have everything in there. So if we choose not to love something, then that just means that's another limitation. And when are we going to get tired of that? Like, if anything, this sounds like this being needs help to me. That's how much compassion you can gain when you take in the limitless, is that you can actually go into still seeing underneath that scaly hide the infinite creation. That's why they say if you can't see the supreme in all, then you can't see the supreme at all. Because that's what the soul is. It is everything. It's like back to square one on one. And so the thing is that this is a magnificent time for us, brother, because it's actually a time where we actually come into total realization of this, and we begin to be able to do something about it. We don't just use traditional methods here. In fact, the resistance has never been about traditional methods. We're not trying to occupy anything but ourselves. Realistically, if it's going to waste time and not going to cause any expansion, we will go and delve deeper into actually perfecting ourselves. So that way we can become, and that's just the thing is, this is what the compassion and the love is. It's when you look at your son or your daughter, your sister, your brother, your mother, and you love them so much and you care for them so much that you're willing to actually break the matrix, meaning that you're willing to actually crack the illusion, that you're willing to do what is necessary. And this is not sometimes just speech. Most of this stuff, again, it takes place on the spiritual realm. This is the after effect. Even David Icke, even though, like I said, I don't like the pro reptilian scriptures, but he even mentioned that you can't change the hologram from in the hologram. Hello.
You have to
meaning that you got to go to where it's emitting from to be able to like on They Live, they needed to go to the broadcasting station to be able to deal with what was going on. So where is it being broadcasted from? Oz is in the back room where things are being broadcasted from. Last time you go in the field, you see the weird geometry everywhere. You're in the back room of Earth. You see that the only beings that are running around are malevolent forces. Everyone else looks asleep. It's because of the frequency they're in. Some people think that just because they're walking around that they're awake. But yet when you go to sleep at night and you dream, aren't you walking around? But does that mean you're awake? So how does it mean just because we're walking around and we have a life here that we're actually awake? Awake is a frequency thing. So that's why when we jump into these frequencies and how do you penetrate? First of all, basic question. How do you penetrate yourself from a cellular level with frequency? Through photon light only. You can go in any laboratory and they'll tell you that you can't even penetrate the cellular level of water unless you're using something on that vibratory frequency. So how is it that we're trying to use dense objects like words in a certain tense, those kind of tones and vibrations to fix real issues? So so I'll just conclude that part of the conversation, telling people what we've done is we've taken it all the way into not the normal stuff. Like, we're not going through Jesus, tried that, it's not working. In fact, it's an entire hierarchy, kingdom, dominion over there. They're running it the same way. Charlemagne, Constantine, Alexander the Great, utilizing the knowledge that they took from the Aztecs or Aztechnology. Then again, to finish the story about Amor Venus, to close that down, they first arrived to the poor old individuals coming out of the clay in Indus Valley and mastered over those individuals until they thwarted their mind. They broke their spirits. And the ones that did not get broke retreated to what we call America now. Those are what we call American Indians. Mm-hmm. Indians are from India. These are all the same people. Cambodia. I'm in Costa Rica right now. Costa Ricans, Peruvians, Cambodians. I might mention that already, but all of these people are the same people. How do you know? Their hair. In the laboratory, you cut the hair and you see the ether of the hair. It's a cone in the hair. It tells you exactly how much ether is inside of each individual.
Well, in their language, they're even saying, what is I think it's the Cherokee Nation, here in the United States. And this is just because I have some guys here that I've been talking with a lot that are Mormon, and I'm trying to figure out more of this Mormon ideology and how in the hell they say Jesus was here in America. And, well, they're saying actually the Cherokee tribe is a lost tribe of Israel. They found that their language is actually closer related to Aramaic than it is to any other Native American language. They find their body style, everything about them is more closely linked to that area, to the land of Israel in ancient times and Aramaic language and all these other things than it is to anything on this side of the world. So there's a lot of credence there. Exactly. Because to simplify it, if we can see every tribe had their wares, meaning that everybody had something that they did. Like some people were blacksmiths, some people had sheared animals for cloth and clothes, etc. Okay, but there was a group that they did priestcraft. Mm-hmm. They were, in a certain sense, centralizing and monopolizing what would be a shaman. And they sent their teachings out, and this is sometimes in case within the Atlantean traditions. They sent their teachers abroad into different areas, but not over the seas. This is the other myth that because people can't put anything together. This is the smokescreen. They're like, well, if that's the case, these people didn't even have boats that could cross across the seas during that time. Okay, well, here's another mystery that needs to be cracked. Notice how, like I told you, there's these advanced camera systems underneath the earth, right? Some people don't realize that just because there's an ocean or just because there's a river, that there are caves that are underneath those oceans and rivers. Like, right. It's something that you have to really think about. But if you understand, if you see a cave, doesn't mean that the water from the ocean is going to go into that cave. It's actually because we're in a bubble and outside of us is a vacuum. The water is generally dispersed from the center of the planet and pushed more towards the outside, while the inside would stay more of what we call dry.
So what then you have is you have these passageways that are underneath the rivers. And there's a lot of occult writing about underneath the rivers, underneath the ocean. This is when you walk the passageways that lead from Lemuria all the way to New York. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you can travel down these passageways and get to areas that now became known as having certain kinds of cultures. But think about it. It's all the same culture. You will find the Cain, who is the king, or the Cohen, the priest king, had arrived to every single culture proclaiming that it was the god. And it carried a symbol as a serpent, and it used the power encased within what's called a Dorje rod of electricity, the electric, the one who can basically shock and magnetize. So this is also the serpent and the bird, magnetics and electrics. Magnetics, light, feathery, in the air, carefree, serpent-like. You see what I mean? So the one who had those powers were the people who had those powers. And remember, this is knowledge, and this is where you get the malevolence, because some people are like, well, then weren't they trying to help us? Okay, this is what I'm trying to say to you. Originally, they are from a group that was the first ones to divide us so that we needed help. Because the thing is that if the guy, he had a little bit twisted on the other show. He said, well, they've helped, they've given us this advanced technology. What could be advanced to a being that is everything?
Right.
In fact, the moment that you attempt to give a being that's everything something that's advanced, you've already started limiting it again. So when something says that it's coming to give you something, it can't take that from you. Until this is the game then, right? They take it from us and then give it back to us and then act like we should be grateful.
And teach us that we couldn't do it on our own and dumb us down so that we can't figure it out on our own or know exactly what we're dealing with. So who is this?
Right.
Who are these? Who are these people that you've cracked the code? Who are these original beings? Who are the people that are doing this?
Here's the big one. It's us.
I guess that makes sense.
And it's us. But seriously, like I can give it to you in the timeline. But what happens here in slow down light is that remember, you got stuff that's here that's quote unquote 60 billion years old. Uh-huh. And then you got stuff that's here that's supposed to got here yesterday.
Right.
Okay. So what you have is what creates your reality is a smear. Then if you wanted to see this, sometimes you may catch a glimpse of this, especially if you're going into another density, but you see things around you smeared. Even the lightest sense is a somewhat of a ghosting, right? Which you're familiar with that term. It's like the TV is there, but then there's another little TV, another little corner of it, which is like a shadow right there. And you think that, oh, that's because maybe it's burning in my retina. No, this is the smear of the timeline. And so it's moving at a certain vibratory frequency to make it all appear solid. But if it starts to raise into another vibratory frequency, everything that can't handle that frequency will disappear. And this is why when you take certain hallucinogens, etc., the first thing that generally goes is the reality. Sometimes at least it pixelates. Right. This is the same reason why when you look under electron microscope at your hand, it's only a series of dots. There's no more collection of the flesh. Mm-hmm. So this is the smear of time then. And that's why when we want to know what's going on is that we have different parts of ourselves. This is a secret to the knowledge of the reptilian. What it is that the reptilian, which they seem to associate with the father, Papa, okay, is fire. Okay. Now fire is phi. Phi likes fighting. It consists of conflict, which is generally the upheavals and foundations, which founding father of the world. And generally, it's like very stern. It's like if you watch fire in action when it's doing its thing, it doesn't need you to, you don't interact with it. You let it do its thing. It has certain uses. And, You see what I mean? Yep. And so that's what the ancients knew that this ancient energy really was about, was that it was very potent, very dangerous. You shouldn't definitely put fire in the hands of children.
Well, it's even one of the, you look at any ancient symbology, like it, excuse me, north, south, east, west, fire, air, water, it's basic elements of the earth. It's basic part of alchemy, salt and fire. It's a very important thing for everything. It's permeated our entire history.
Exactly. And everything in its weight and measure. And that's why when you see it on a cross, the goal is to get in the center of the cross. Now they even strung Jesus up on an unbalanced cross. I mean, just so far away from where the truth is. But the center of the cross is the balancing of the fire, earth, wind, water in each unique individual that needs to come out of that individuality. Because think about it, what also creates, because here's another secret to the knowledge that I was hinting to earlier, what creates this individualization, and this is why you can get these astrology and zodiacs, is that you're still talking about that each person is a light. And when they move closer together, then there are stars in the sky that are so close together, they appear like one star. So what happens is that with these reincarnations that we're dealing with through these astrological signs are creating us in different weights and measures, different temperaments. Oh, he's mean. Oh, she's nice. So these different temperaments are where the alchemist has to come in almost on like a one-by-one basis. So at times, if you can see what's going on with the world and how individuals become, it's like each person, there's no one size fits all for them. You have to come exactly at their no point. Well, but any master
a natal chart.
Do that.
Yeah, if you look up a natal chart, that's exactly what a natal chart is. It's a lot more than your horoscope in the newspaper.
Exactly. So imagine an individual that's looking at your aura like it's a natal chart, and then seeing where the points of light are not connecting, and also where the sphere is vibrating improperly, and then adding somewhat of an etheric magnet to balance out your wheel. That's the rod of the Caduceus. Okay. This is another deeply entwined symbolism that's been around for a minute because it explains to you everything. Now, who do you have on the two sides entwining? You have the two serpents, black serpent, white serpent. These are the two polarities that are necessary to generate energy, but they have their own characteristics. But what is the straight and narrow way, though? Let's not just look at the path, which is the tree or the serpents. That's why the trees and the serpents go together. Even when you get on the astral plane, you'll see many of the trees are actually what we call serpents, and not all of them are negative, i.e. ayahuasca. So what you have going on is you have this synonymous entwining of these two serpents, but there is another path. There is the middle pole. Straight and narrow is the way. That's called the solar path. That means that you're going to be flying down the tube of light, though. So if you're actually and it emits. So if you're any kind of falsehood, as you're trying to get closer to it, you get scareder of it. This is the secret between it and the Sphinx. The Sphinx is out in front to protect the library within, because on the astral plane, if you are scared of the lion or that ferociousness of the lion, then this means that you haven't realized all itself, so thus you cannot have access. So if you see why the lion is synonymous with the sun, the straight and narrow path that you see in the Caduceus rod that leads up to the globe, which is basically wholeness, all there is, everything collected, is in the center of the rod again. So it's a tube. So then you have the two intertwining snakes, which is the path. That's called zigzag zig in the ancient cults. It's basically the path of the tree, which is long. Just as in math, what is the shortest distance to the goal is a straight line, not a zigzag.
Right.
So the zigzag is all these lives known as drama, aka dragon mother. Dra means dragon or snake. Ma meaning flesh or of flesh, material, matrix, etc. So
even the tree of life has the flaming sword that zigzags down the middle of it, right? To connect all the different. Yep.
And that sword is the divisor. Like that is the one. That's why Jesus is symbolized by a sword. Jesus is symbolized by a cross. A cross upside down is a sword. That's how they used to make them. Then they didn't have points on the tip.
And so what happens is you have that. Who's our highest archangel? Michael. He's the one that protect, or at least, yeah, he's the one that I affiliate with the most with his flaming sword. Yeah.
Right. With the sword, which is basically used to divide good from evil. And then but then there's a metamorphosis to this, because that is actually known as the Orion saga. It becomes a sad story when you're telling it to your children, because what happens is that battle never ends between Michael and the dragon, because they are actually spawning infinitely in hypercubes. So it becomes an actual story of creating energy from another being that, because of how small and petty we've gotten, is holding the entire thing in the hand like a marble. You see, when you become to a certain degree small, let's say in vibratory frequency, petty, then you put yourself actually in the clutches of something more so than more expanded than it. So then terms like earth is my footstool can become true. Like this guy's got the foot on my his foot on my head, and the king's got his foot on my head, and it's going in taxes. So the thing is that this is a real thing that is interacting itself on multiple levels of the reality, even down on the microscopic level with viruses and bacteria. So we can choose at any point to actually end it from any level. And that's what the beauty is. We can actually go into our bodies, if we're primarily physical, start cleaning out the body and actually get it to a point where it's capable of building up the frequency that correct the other bodies. Likewise, you can do it through the soul. The deeper part about this also, Robert, is that there's no real division between the soul, spirits, and the mind. The people who created the term the mind were the same ones that thought the world was flat. This was like Freud and Jung, but hundreds of years before that, thinking that the mind was separate, something that was actually gained during one lifetime. No, the mind is none other than energy and etheric substance itself that is actually gathered with this vehicle. So when you die, because I've seen some people and know some people on the other side, they're only eidolons now. What is an eidolon? It's a shell of a man that he used to be, meaning that he's actually on the other dimension or the different plane, acting the same way that he was acting when he was here, carrying on with the same behaviors because he got stuck in that pattern, right? So this is, I'm trying to explain to you what happens with even what's going on now with people around you that you see, they're stuck in the same pattern, doing the same thing. It doesn't have to be the hocus pocus on the spiritual plane, but on the spiritual plane, I'll tell you, there are lost souls. Many of them don't know that they died. Death comes so fast and the transition is so fast as if you're not quick. That's why they call it the quick and the dead, right? If you're not quick, you won't be able to grab your body. In a certain tense, like grab the state of consciousness that you haven't divided, that basically you're just now free of the physical body.
I have a very good friend of mine, my wife and we have a very good friend that's a Reiki, she's an Akuna Reiki master, and she talks quite a bit about that, low vibrational spirits that basically don't know they've died. They were very violent or very mean people, and they basically are trapped, don't know they've died, so they can inhabit this world, they can inhabit your world, they can cause a lot of damage.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's a dominion over them because generally in life they've gotten involved or made, even unknowingly signed some contract or something that's gotten them involved with other entities. So what their shell is then, especially for an individual that's an inexperienced medium, it becomes basically an entity that can be used. So basically what I'm telling you is that some people have contacted mediums. The medium, because of being able to remove their spirit somewhat from their body, can then take on the spirit that the person is that they're looking for or that wants to talk to them. And that can animate their three-dimensional body and use their vocal box to actually say something. So then obviously these shells contain the data of the person's life. So when they say, oh, I remember prom night, the first thing the person says, oh shit, this is real. He knows about prom night. So they can't be, but they know the shell. They're reading the shell like the disc on Tron, Robert. That's why the disc on Tron was the key thing, because the disc is the DVD. It is David. It is the disc. Notice DVD is David. It's the saucer. It's the disc. It's the magnetic spin or the aura, the disc that actually contains all our information. So what reincarnation is, when you pass with your magnetic field across a vortex apex, meaning the actual apex in a vortex is the point that you see at where the two sides of the hourglass come into contact with each other. You are in contact in that point with a stronger, if you are not strong, a stronger magnetic field. So then what happens, my friend, when you place a magnetic field that contains information, such as a credit card, in front of a very strong magnet?
Bam, gone.
It wiped
out immediately.
Right? So why do you think? So why do you think you don't remember so much about where you were doing? And I don't remember so much about what I was doing in these multiple lifetimes that we had to have been living. See, because the reason why you know you had to have been living it is because of the state that you're in now. It takes several upgrades to get into one of these 5-base vehicles, whether anyone wants to say so or not. Like, you don't just come into one of these. You have to be a certain kinds of soul force. And those souls generally have more experience in this universe. But why can't you remember those experiences? And of course, we know why. It's because that our magnetic field, our auras are wiped clean at the reincarnation station. And then we're put back on the planned net meaning the actual incubator that we're in the cube, incubation, and then dealt hypercube codes, meaning languages that we don't understand because they're right in front of our face. That's how everything is created. And then put into some level of disbelief because there becomes a God, or basically every time they put now a supreme being in front of us, then every time it's time for us to conquer disbelief, we let God handle that. That's why even a person's hard-coded, Jesus, right?
Help
soon
me.
as something
Help
like
me.
big
Help me,
happens,
Lord.
like they
Yep.
may be even the tough shit. But when something go, God, help me.
When they
it's hardwired then, right? The
Yeah.
dependency. So what the training is to actually begin to walk you through. See, now this is where the M state comes in. We call it now the M state of mind.
And this is your
Because
training
that
at Astral Quest. This is what you guys, this the
Right,
resistance. This is what you do.
Right. And this is the supplements that are now at Realm Dynamics. That onset of fear, which is actually biolocal, because notice how the birds are in fear. You run to a bird, it's going to take off. Insects are in fear. So fear is not just a human thing. It's resident. So even so it's like a local frequency that's just waiting for you to access it. And it has a strong voltage to it so that it shuts everything. So let me explain to you very simply. When the third eye begins to open, the fear of what the person sees shuts it. Just like when if you're coming around the corner, you don't see me and you get startled, you jump back, you withdraw. It's a natural instinct, right? So this natural instinct of us withdrawing stops us from getting out of the body, which is the pentagram, the pin. Okay. It's a place where light is kept trapped unless you can get out of it. If you can get out of it, it becomes a magnificent vehicle. That's why you understand Pythagoreans held that knowledge themselves, and then they got it from Apollonius, and there was many others that actually had the knowledge like Abraxas and these different characters that were using the knowledge even to their own benefit, or creating their own schools of individuals that could get out of the body and begin to explore the fields that are outside of the body. So again, if you can't get out of the body, then you can't get out of the trap.
So this
But
isn't
if
just
you
astral
can,
projection and lucid dreaming. This is a completely another level. This is far beyond.
Right.
I mean,
Lucid dreaming preludes this. It's
Right.
crawling before walking in a certain tense. You're attempting to lucid dream first.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're, you're just attempting to write a dream journal.
Right.
Then, but not harping too much on it because it's a highly programmed field. Boy, if you think that this world is programmed, wait until you get a load of what they're doing in the dream world. Until you wake up in the dream, it's always like, if you see that's not your mom, that's not your father, that's not your sister, that's not your brother, unless you have your filters clean, meaning that your body has centers that see into these worlds. They're the chakras. If your chakras are dirty or broken, like the wheels on the clock, they can become broken or distorted during your growing up when they're developing. So when you look through that eye, it's like almost looking through a broken glass or a broken lens. You can misinterpret what you're seeing. So generally with most individuals dealing with power down or dysfunctional chakras, when they go into a dream, they may dream about their sister, and the sister may be just hurting them and doing stuff like that. And then the person wakes up, especially if they are on the onset of their spiritual awakening, they'd be like, man, I knew my sister wasn't really for me. And this is creating the dissension. Again, using programming through the dream world, which is generally embedded more in the person's mind. It's not something that has to always be broadcast. Although many people who are going into higher levels of spiritual ascent, they will attempt to program your field directly, meaning putting a field around you, utilizing Wi-Fi and many of the different technologies to start manipulating your dream world. So it's just easier to watch your emotions in those states.
well, and that
But
explains.
again,
I've seen dreams where I've had a person, and my wife and I have, I think we've been connected for a very long time, but we'll have these dreams where we'll go, God, you were in my dream last night, but I knew it wasn't you. Like, I knew it wasn't you.
for sure.
It wasn't you, but it was you, but I knew it wasn't actually you. And I think, and it happens to me quite a bit, where you'll have a character, but in reality it's not that character. And that explains a lot.
sure.
Of it. It's an imposter.
For sure. They're already known to animate. In fact, that's where most of the games go on at. And that's why when you read, and this is the problem with the human when it passes from this world and it becomes it's under the dominion of certain spirits. Because what happens is, like, if you read some of the grimoires, you'll see like Demon Kokokbiel has 100,000 spirits under its charge.
Right.
So who are those spirits? Spirits is an individualized soul. It's a being that doesn't have a physical physical body, but is still holding on to that individualized attitude. So, but now it's just in an etheric state. And because of them getting some kind of vibratory resonance with quote unquote Coco BL, now when they get to the astral plane, because this being is more advanced, it lives on the astral plane. It's like basically someone coming, if you live on your street, your little city, your little town, and then someone comes there that's not from there, they're not going to be as versed at what streets to go down, who not to deal with, how to make money, all those different kind of things. So if we have to just wake up, like I say, wake up, Alice. There are beings on the dimension and off the dimension that have intelligence. And on top of that, many of them are out of the vibratory frequency of what we call sight. So we can't see them, but we can feel them. Many of us hear them through ringings in our ear. And then also the different ear it rings in governs the polarity of the being most of the time if you're calibrated properly. So remember, you can't test or discern any kind of situations, any kind of tools, anything with a bad system already. And this is what kind of you have going on. And that's why we say the first thing to the path is understanding. This means you go within. You don't have to actually go outside and try to make everyone believe in what you've just read. You need to fix your vehicle first, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to go out there and you're going to collide with every single individual that you come in contact with. And they're only going to serve to damage you further before you perfect those chakras, especially if you have higher chakras open for whatever reason. Maybe you've taken some gateway drug. Maybe you've been listening to the Golden Ring Volume 200 binaural beat for the 30th time, and it's finally penetrated your third ear, and now you're totally vibrating and going into another frequency. The chakras open. So what happens is these chakras walking around open, but look at now. Do you see how wrong this is in a certain sense?
Right.
You now got this person walking around the street, heart chakra wide open, in a reality that is a concrete jungle in a certain sense, that has got all types of individuals around with thousands of thoughts going through their mind, no peace, no wholeness, no calmness in their mind, and just spraying their free radical, chaotic auric field all into your opened up sutra, meaning that like the open chakra is like almost like opening a wound or a womb. You see, notice how a woman's womb doesn't heal. It is an open cut to a certain degree if you think about it.
Right.
So that's what the wound, the etymology connects with that. So you got people spraying all their dirty cosmic negative dark matter dust all into your open womb. And the next birth that you have from that chakra after it closes, because once the chakra closes, now everything that's went inside of it is going to cultivate. It's in a matrix now. So you see how mystical this is? You can put elements from the environment, for better or worse, inside of your sutra, inside of your system, inside of your chakra, and then you can close your chakra like a world, and then it will grow and cultivate in there and become stronger, and it will power you. And that is understanding. That's when you're doing to your body to a certain tense like what the government is doing to us. Now, let me explain this. When you go into the gym, it's hard work, baby. Like it's not, you're not in here
like
lifting the lightest
weights,
weights,
like a pig every
right?
day.
You see what I mean?
Yep.
But when you do it to yourself, right, it's going to have some level of benefit. But if you're doing it to someone else, you're probably going to go to jail after a while. You see what I mean? So, or go into some level of imprisonment. Like people think that the physical jail in this world is only symbolic. Like that's why they come in there with the sheriff badge. He got the 7-pointed star on. He with the heavenly. He thinks he's heavenly. He's ancient. He's master. He's only gone to the 3rd degree, right? And then you got, all these different individuals with their shields on, standing behind the shield because they don't know anything about how to erect one on their own. Mm-hmm. And then they're just, interacting on you. And meanwhile, you become some demon. This is what people don't realize is going on. I say it like it is. I've had it happen to me. You like in the world, you're trying to get ahead. You pick up some dust, some viruses and some stuff off of the DNA. You keep connecting with the other people that are suggesting things. And the next thing you know, you've inherited a archonic stance, meaning that you actually become the coalescing of the archonic being spoke of in the Gnosticism. Mm-hmm. And then you operate in the world like that until somebody comes and breaks that shell, breaks that reality, breaks that illusion of you thinking that you've actually really obtained something and thus not being able to obtain anything. And that breaking is generally going to happen through compassion, because the stage that person's actually in, like if we go and try to fight these, you're going to try to fight Martians with weapons. Are you serious? Look what I just said. You're going to fight Martians with weapons. Are you serious? Serious. The planetary system has been fighting Martians with weapons, and it's just been this back and forth. See, even encoded within the words, they tell you universe, uni, united, together, verse, in conflict. What the hell? How are we together but fighting each other? It's called the body. The body, listen, it's waging war. Every time we eat something, right, that doesn't is going to be not going to be good for the liver, we just went to war with the liver. That's how it is. But guess what? As above, so below. So thus anything you eat above in your body is going to affect the lower areas. So who's in dominion? The upper part of the body, the globe, the head. It is the only globe on the body. So the head, right? That's why the body is a map of the headquarters. And when you sit in the headquarters, but in the center, not in the quarter, not right, he's right, or left, but in the center, right? So you sit there and then you give command. This is the battlefield of Arunja now. Now you summons, even in Egypt, they say, raise the Jed. So as then you're your own Kane Khan, King, Coin, Kim, Priest, King. You tell yourself, yo, what the hell are you guys doing? You guys are asleep. Raise the Jed. I want everyone to take account for what they've been doing. Heart, what's your problem? Why are you offline? Liver, why are you offline? What's going on? And then you'll be like a judge then, because everyone will come complaining. Well, you drunk this. And then you'll be like, well, wait a minute, it wasn't me. So who was it then?
Right.
Who was it then?
Telling my own body it wasn't me.
Right. But then the interesting part is that this finds itself to be partially true because of possession, where the person is generally put is in the coccyx of their spine. This is witnessed within the dog, which is very close to us, our best friend. What happens is that the coccyx, or the tail of the human being, was cut off. We were domesticated, but there's still, you see people still now born with tail a little bit back there. And some girls even have little holes right there. I haven't seen any guys, not to say, well, there's
a thing called cauda.
The reality is,
there's a thing called cauda equina, because all of the bases of all of our nerves meet there in the cauda equina, right there in the coccyx. And if you fall down, like fall off a house or fall down hard playing basketball, if you rupture that, you can die immediately. It's a very serious thing. That's our Achilles heel. That's our true Achilles heel.
Wow. Well, there it is. That's the aha moment for me over here, because I didn't know that, brother. So thank you for that update. Because I mean, I just know it from the side that our seat of our cells when retreating from the brain, because in the brain, in the corpus callosum, that's known as the throne room. So that's where you normally reside. When there's an invasion of thoughts from the temples, meaning the temples is Cain and Abel. These are the two serpents. They're inside the temples, setting themselves up as God, whispering in your ear, like you see the Caduceus staff. They terminate at the poles, whispering in the ear, good angel, bad angel, you should do this, you should do that, right? Until they convince you that you should leave the throne. And then when you leave the throne, they go from the temple to power. Notice how the Pope did the same thing. He stayed in the temple first, and then when the king was shown to be weak, he moved him off the throne and went into temporal power. Right? And so now they're in power. So where's the king going to go? Just where Buddha went. He kicked him out the castle. Right? And then now the first chakra you hit is generally this throat chakra. This is not the ability to express or create anymore. And then it's basically like a domino effect, as they call the vicious cycle, because each lower chakra is so foreign to a being that generally resides on the higher chakra. Every time they get to an even lower chakra, it's like being born again, because they're so far away from that level of the division. You see what I mean? As they're basically falling down the ladder of lights within themselves, aka the fall, until they land into the coccyx of their spine. And then the sediment or the fear builds on top of them. So if you understand what's going on, as they say, Kundalini is dormant within the spine. Even when it tries to awake, the fears that are stacked on top of it. When it amplifies itself, it shines a light on those fears. So most of the time it snuffs that light back out. And so this is, again, what happens on a simple level. When you're about to come out of the body, you feel like you're like, oh, am I about to die? And then that gets you right back in the body. Even people have experienced this, more people have experienced this than not, because even when you go to sleep and you start feeling like, they call it sleep paralysis, this is the onset of getting out of the body. But imagine you're actually calm during those stages and completely present and witness the entire gliding of you coming out of the body, right?
Yep.
So what I was explaining earlier about the monatomics is, especially with certain mixtures of monatomics, which is what we're really working with, not to mention taking this stuff through equipment that's upwards of $50 million, laboratories in Switzerland, just to make this type of element. But I'm telling you, it's not new. The schools that Freud and Jung set up for the rich people administer these kind of supplements to individuals who show prolonged mental problems, because this is the only way you can correct certain parts of the atomic structure, is to show it corrected versions, meaning that even on a cellular level, it learns off of perfection. So that's the same thing on this reality. When we come into more greater states of our knowledge, then others learn off of what we're presenting. But again, I've kind of got off of the train of thought for a second, but
it's a huge part of it, monatomics and everything. You just gave on two huge points for me. One, fear is failure. I had a very important turning point in my life where that was pointed out to me. Fear is failure. Fear is failure. Just as above, so below. Fear is failure. There was a very important time in my life, but also when you're talking about these different experiences, I believe, like ayahuasca and DMT, that was like this experience you're talking about. The first time I ever took DMT, I had that same experience where I was prepared to go on my journey and I got scared. I didn't take my own voice. I got scared right there as I could feel myself leaving my body and came right back in. And that was the first time it actually scared me off trying it again for a while. And this was not my first kind of journey experience at all, but it was my first time specifically trying that one. And I was so interested in that one because of its natural use and its occurrence in the rest of the world. I feel that is the vision quest that all people are meant to go on, since it is DMT, since dimethyltryptamine is present in every part of our world. And that really kind of turned me off for a while, like introspect, looking at that inner space, looking at myself going, I was too scared to go on that trip. I was too scared to do it and see the light. And I did it again. I had full success, but that first time really scared me. Really did.
And then, it's interesting because even if you think about it when you were younger, it's the same concept that applies. Like when you go into areas that you're unfamiliar with, it's always easier to summon the courage that is necessary to transcend through that with your friends.
Yeah.
I can remember doing different things that I would have never done by myself, but been there with my friends and been able to go. Yep. And that's kind of like what was set up. I can't really tell anybody where to go and to do that now, just because of so many vipers being all over the place. But the reality is that we had individuals in ancient times that we could trust to take us on these journeys. And that's what a lot of our experiences consisted of. And it's very interesting when you think about it, because what I found out in some of the books were when people, first of all, the reason why the whole concept of a god and things like that didn't really appeal to anyone that knew what was going on is because they had constant communication with their ancestors. So the ancestor, in effect, would tell them what to do. Hey, you see that bark on that tree? I'm looking at it from this side, so it's cool. Basically, you see that girl that already traced her entire biorhythm. It doesn't work out. So you see, there is this connection that we had to, it's like someone looking at the other side. How do you see that on the other side? And it's still you, because remember, all of us are coming from each other. So it's still you. But like, how do things look over there? It's not the same. Like there's some level of distortion on your side. And so that's, of course, how our world is. It has many different shields and different cloaks and things that different things are cloaked under. But on the other side, nothing is cloaked. So you have, this kind of encouragement. And then lastly, what I found out is that if someone, because many of those dismembered souls and ghosts, as they call them, are clinging to this reality, trying to get back in, and they're having a difficult time. And the reason why they want to come back is because they're still stuck in the memory of their loved ones and people that they think are even still here. right? And so what happens is because they didn't have closure. So this is a feeling. That's why Earth is designed now. It's very malevolent of what's going on. That has to be corrected is because when a person leaves, they could be a graduated soul in a sense and know how to thrust past these current gravitational fields in a sense, but not want to do that because they may leave behind other individuals that they've met here. You see what I mean?
And then even more sinister, an even more sinister part of that is what my friend Jeannie, our Reiki master, where we live in Los Angeles, was saying, is that some of these are truly addicts. They're addicted to drugs. They're alcoholics. They're addicted to something.
Sure.
And since they're still here, they're in a quasi state, but within our realm, they know that if they get into your body, they can get that feeling, make you go take heroin or drink a drink or smoke a cigarette or beat your wife or whatever it is that they're addicted to, and get that feeling, that real raw human emotion again. And that's what gets them allowed to hang around and even force us to do it more.
That's a deep thing. That's a deep thing for everyone to contemplate and to take a moment in the show to contemplate, because it chimes in with, obviously there's information that has been revealed that a lot of the addictions and things that we have are from some of the more of the quote unquote negative side of our ancestry, or those entities trying to actually encourage us to do that. But now it actually give it more clarity in speaking that it actually is something that being was somehow asphyxiated with and wants to experience again. And it's interesting because that may even get a lot into even now, because this is real time. It's whatever we're talking about is still going on. It has probably a lot to do with the types of, again, sex that is being engaged in now, as far as what we kind of think in our mind, during the times of even synthetic, sex, which is basically masturbation, and different things of that level. And actually, I cracked that thing entirely because obviously pornography is a huge situation going on the planet. And what it really, really boils into, because a lot of people, they go on one side and go on another, but it really goes into, like, some people, when they sit in nature, they have an appreciation enough for nature to actually go into what we call an orgasm, that it's so beautiful to them that they actually can accomplish that with nature. But there was a higher level even to that, which was the person who could do it within. So we're watching almost like a constant descent, the same thing with the food. First, you can do it within. Basically, you can turn yourself on. Like, that's infinite energy, perpetual energy, done. Next thing is you need something external. So, i.e., you paint this beautiful reality, nature, seas, oceans, all this kind of stuff, but then you're still kind of dependent on the reality. Next thing, you split yourself. Basically, you now have a opposite pole of yourself outside of yourself that you have some kind of dependency on. And this is like basically the male and the female. Then you do it one more time and you do it with the food, and then you do it again and you do it with the vegetables and you do it again. And then so this lets us see almost somewhat of the drama, as I said again, what goes on in between the transitional phase of, AKA the fall.
Isn't that Tantra?
In the actual things that occur.
Isn't that Tantra? That's tantric sex, right?
Right. I mean, that's a major part of tantric sex. I mean, there's different kinds. Like, the thing is that, remember, if Tantra is accomplished within, so just see the difference. If Tantra is accomplished within, it's the same thing as that first point that we were talking about. It's actually androgynous. Right. But if it's accomplished without, like, you need something to actually externally excite you, then now you've gone to that. So it's going to be less anyway, because you're going to need that. It's a dependency then in order to get off in a certain sense. And this doesn't mean people need to go leave your wife and go leave what I'm saying is that the power is within. Like, it's when you can actually turn yourself on. So what I found out is the whole culprit to pornography is not so much as the women and not so much as the sex and all of that, but more so is the desensitization that actually takes place within the male mind, mostly with his perspective of.
And that seems to be the whole problem with society looking at sex right now. Is that's people's problem with pornography, is that we're being desensitized. People no longer, a lot of men are being more violence prone to women during sex because of it. And a lot of people think, well, everybody's having sex, so I should just be able to walk up to this chick and take her in the alley and have sex with her. People, they're being desensitized to our social norms and our humans' social contract. They're taking away the social contract.
Because we're never going to be, and this is why, because some people easily jump up and say, well, no, I'm not trying to, you a Mormon or something? Are you Christians or something? I mean, come on. But what I'm talking about here is that the whole act in itself, first of all, has a great deal of tantric nature to it of generating real realities. And the first one obviously is etheric, and then the second one is physical, which comes out in the baby. So really, all of this stuff, iPhone 5, PlayStation 4, whatever you can think of, there's no complexity like what's going on in the human body, even exhibited within the other animals. Mm-hmm. So thus that means that the highest level then of what you can actually do here is really create a baby.
Right.
So then when you look back to this original sin, aka original Zen, I love to call it. So what happens is that you find that there's an encouragement to replicate without understanding the knowledge of what to do with the replication, i.e. there's an actual act of having a new child or a new world, but not the knowledge of how to take care of one. And this also is occurring redundantly every single minute minute
or
now.
Even,
worlds being generated.
I hate to make a completely baseless joke, but or even to know what to do at the very beginning. Because the very first time I looked around and went, what do I do next?
I even was like, man, when the baby comes, like, first there's this onset of, okay, the baby is here now. Because even before the baby arrives, in our current state of mind, we're like, man, I can't believe I'm having a baby. Thus, I can't believe I'm having a baby. And then once it comes out, you're like, oh my goodness, it's a baby. And then you go into it, and then it seems like nobody prepared you. It's like DMT. Nobody can prepare you for what's about to actually occur with you and this baby. And it's interesting because in our lineage, though, that was never the case for a while. It's like you had elders there that were going to show you just like they raised you, etc. There was a group thing. So thus you didn't also get where the baby had to be left alone. Because it's or with someone else.
See, we got that. We were lucky we got that because my wife is Buddhist. Yeah. Her family's Asian from Taiwan. So that's the way they do it. You know, the mom comes, the whole family takes care of the baby. And for 30 days, the only focus is feeding the mom special foods to nourish her, get rid of these poisons. And then there's a team of like 5 women that are taking care of the baby all day, round the clock, every day, making sure mom's breastfeeding, make sure she's eating, make sure she's doing all that stuff. But our society's even lost that idea of community for something so important as the next generation.
The interesting part is about the Americas is that it never was really present without it being under the state of being usurped, meaning that generally, like the first settlers that came in bought it from their motherlands. Mm-hmm. And that was since they had already cleared out most of the Indians that were there it was like a testing ground in a sense. Like when I look at America or America, because remember, it stretches out like an entire Amazonic body. And it's really a entity or a corp as a corpus, or it's a body in itself.
Corporation.
The top being North, the middle being Central America, and then the low being South America, right? Mm-hmm. So this is what the founding fathers knew. They designed the entire America based on the blueprint. And so what happens though is that you see this, oh my goodness, the plotting and the planning, and that's where it gives you the identity of how much reasoning, and that's why it's been connected to the serpent and wisdom, and something that has to have been around for a long time, because you literally get something that doesn't just think about it's only 72 years here on the planet and what it can accomplish then. Thus, it becomes very selfish. It thinks about thousands of years in the future as it continues to cultivate a plan that is stretched out over a prolonged period of time where nobody knows about what's going on until that type of knowledge is ready to be revealed. You see what I mean? Because like if you look at the United States, you find basically people were planted in the United States in order to colonize with each other in a sense of like a DNA mixture in different states, though, that were segmented off based on the rulers of those states, but them understanding that interbreeding, even the slavery and these kind of things. Because if you look at not even just United States, but other countries, they say that symbolic sons of God to the daughters of women were known as basically the headmasters going into the slaves. It was metaphoric.
Funny
to
that
all
you
of
say
these
that.
different societies.
Did you know that the Queen of England owns more of Colorado than anybody else?
Well, that would explain it, because in Denver, that's where that vortex point is. That's why they keep all of those prisoners down in Denver, and then you see all that stuff at the airport, etc. Yep. But very high occultic place. Anytime you see those large mountain ranges, have hollow areas inside of them, and those become, in a certain sense, the best bases.
Well,
so it's interesting because
Cheyenne Mountain is a base.
Exactly. Like, when can we ever decide? It was like, hey, why don't we just go ahead and get us a mountain base right now, Robert? I think we should make that move. It's like, because there's a mountain like right here. I'm looking at one, and I'm like, well, why can't I go? And but that lets us see sometimes real quickly this limitation, right?
Well, not really. You know, I mean, that's that again. My buddy, brother Robert Johnson, and I had a long conversation, 4 or 5 podcasts to go about Genesis 1:27. That fact that God made man in his own image. Does that mean that God made man God? Right? Does that mean that, like, what? Because there's no description of what he meant by that own image. So if he said, "I made you in my own image," that pretty much means he made us God, right? I think that means he gave us the ability to do anything that we want.
According to the Hebrew, it actually meant that it gave us what we would call its mind.
Well, even better.
What was wired. Well, it depends, because it was a dualistic brain. Mm-hmm. They say that this particular entity, also known AKA as double brain Yakub, but this being basically was, when we talk about headquarters, is responsible to a certain degree for dividing the quadrants of the brain through the genetic synthesis. And that this giving the mind of these beings, they knew that as the advantage because they knew the sickness within their mind. So when giving this soul a mind, because obviously the soul doesn't have concepts of what we're calling the mind right now. It just doesn't make any sense to the soul. It's like, limitation, or individualization. I don't think that's a good idea. But once being convinced to do that, then this mind of God, it says, now they're like us, knowing good from evil. That means now they know good and evil duality, because before they didn't know it. Why do you know that this is true? Because the babies don't know it. You watch a baby walking through the cemetery or through any funeral, they're not sobbing like the parents, because they know not what you're doing. They haven't loaded that program and that code. It has basically really no effect on them. But once knowing certain things that may not even be necessarily the things to know, like, that's why it later on follows up when you go into Enoch, that this knowledge was abhorred in heaven. Like, the cutting of roots, man, this is cheap stuff. Like, what are you talking about? Like, decoration of eyes? Like, man, that's alluring. It sounds like you're trying to trap. This is sneaky. Get him out of here. You see, it was more like that. It's like in a tense, they would deal with you right then when you came. They could tell, like, an advanced being can tell from what you're saying. And as it continuously, from your aura, but as it continuously deteriorated, there are still beings on the dimension that can just add up what you're saying. If you say something to me in Hebrew, I can add up what you're saying, and that number is going to tell me if you're lying or not. Why? Because if you drop Hebrew down on itself, meaning you drop all the characters down on themselves, they make a Star of David. I have the chart on the website. So what you're looking at with languages, they're actually whole symbols split apart. So that's language, or Sanskrit is a fire language.
Yeah, it came from fire, right?
Exactly. Well, the fire was the frequency. The fire was actually the vibratory, the frequency itself. And that's why they say through degrees, you learn about this fire who is Father. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Masonics go up through degrees. Temperatures are measured in degrees. Knowledge is measured in degrees. He's got a doctor's degree. He's got a PhD degree. She's 33rd degree. It's 500 degrees out here. And this degrees is how much heat you can take. Huh. So, because what happens is that it's limitless. Still remember, now crush all of what they've told you and look in the face of it. What you're dealing with it is so powerful that when attempting to assume it yourself, you get burned up at a certain degree. And then when you get burned up at that degree, you remain at that degree. You take that degree, and then that degree defines you from all levels. So it's like when you say I'm a 33rd degree, it means that's all. Like, I only can handle 33 degrees of this. I can't handle 900 degrees. I can't handle beyond degrees. You see what I mean? Or I'm a doctor. I don't know anything beyond doctor. I'm not a surgeon. Right. You see what I mean? So these are the limitations of how much fire or knowledge or passion or will and all the things that knowledge and is real knowledge and truth is connected to, that one can really take and hold when they're trying to hold it on their own. And that's how it was explained to me, why the laughing was going on. It said, you see, the ability that you have is limited because of how many you are connected to. Your body cannot hold this. It actually will really physically damage you. Like, I was one of the individuals to get out of something that they say most people never make it out of. I did the equivalent of calling God within. It's like enacting a nuclear weapon inside of you. Implosion versus explosion. And I wasn't completely like ready for it in a certain tense. And I actually rehabilitated myself from a very highly energetic field, meaning that this vibration is a vivid thing. And when you awake Kundalini, man, people's hair catch on fire. If the chakra that comes from the throat up is closed or in the downward position or locked, the energy goes up there and then it hits it and then it goes off to the left or the right. This damages the chakra first from the impact, and then it knocks the person into the left or right hemisphere of their consciousness. And this is why you have these exalted, very exalted, malevolent forces, because now they're up higher on the tree, but either on the left or the right side. So they're not balanced. So they're still quote unquote malevolent forces, but they're just in a different stage, like what they call like an ascended master or whatever. It's still stuck in that whole mastery state of consciousness. It never learned the Ankh, which is to cycle the energy. It just stayed in one place. And this is the danger of staying with one level of knowledge. Like that's all there really is, unless you're talking about all itself. Anything else, you can't stay in it too long. You treat it like a subject or a level on the ladder, and then you go from there. Because notice how how a pyramid is originally built was through steps. So the first pyramid, 7 or 8, 9 steps. This is just how many stages you would have to go till you get to total realization in that particular system of belief. Then when you see the pyramids in Egypt, the reason why they look so smooth, they say, is because they are a series of steps that create a hierarchy that is much more complex and much more larger than anything that has actually been on this planet. And that hierarchy or structure, which you see exhibited within many secret societies, has served to keep man trapped inside the pyramid, each of them, the ones that make decisions at least, competing with one another to get on a higher step of the ladder. So this is like when you see someone that's a little bit higher than you trying to yank their feet and pull them down off the ladder rather than push them up so that you both can reach the prize. Because after all, in a pyramid, if you're inside of a pyramid and you start going to the top, if everyone from the bottom tries to go to the top, at the second level, everyone can't go. There's not enough room. Think about it. So when you get to the complete top, I mean, there can't be a room for everyone on the bottom. So there was many metaphors to this type of symbolism with this fire language. And then obviously what you're dealing with is just like in the comic book when they say there were some things that you should never let fall into the hands of evil, right?
Yep.
This is what they were talking about. It's that cone language. It's the language, because remember, there's one language that's called the language of the Malachim. Malachim means king. This is the stars. This is the language that is basically made from a dot to dot with the stars, connecting the energies in the resident shields, meaning the stars that hang out together, that are bound together to protect themselves from assailing forces, right? And then you have that. And then you have, the star, the shield, sailing forces. Okay, anyway, I had, for a moment, just kind of lost the idea. There was another side. Okay, again, this knowledge is also encrypted, so sometimes it takes a second to decrypt. There was an ancient language known as the Enochian, which Enoch is Hanok, Hanok is Cohen. Enoch is an anagram for Cohen. Look at it, E-N-O-C-H.
I thought Enochian knowledge meant it came directly from the angels, right?
Right, but look at it. Enochian, Enoch, E-N-O-C-H, C-O-H-E-N, Cohen. So this means Enoch was a priest. We know that. We can derive that. But you can trace it back further if you say, well, then the language of Enoch is higher than the language of the Malachim. Because the language of the Malachim is just for the kings, but the language of Enoch is for the priests. So you have individuals that are functioning on a priestcraft language that basically is it's a cone language. Just like you see the Sumerian, what is he holding in his hand? The pine cone. Some people think it's a pineal gland. Oh my goodness. It's like, here we go again, back to the rudimentary explanations. The pineal gland is the reason why if you look at the pine cone, you look at the back of the pine cone, that concave, triangular design that you're seeing
Eye
is
of Horus. Just say Eye of Horus.
Right. Well, I'm talking about how because the Eye of Horus is a little bit different because it's actually a complete drawing of an eye within different separations, right? But this is when you look at the bottom of a pine cone or you play 528 hertz into a cymatic device, you see these concave, meaning that the triangles are bent. They're not straight line triangles. And that means all of the difference when you're talking about masculine and feminine or organic and synthetic. So what happens is that these curved triangles, that field meshes over this reality like a HUD. When you open up the third eye, you gain a concave triangle HUD that meshes over the reality, allowing you to see in the spaces within the spaces. Basically, remember I told you it's a hypercube, so there's all these different coalescing points, aka spaces. So what the third eye does is it collapses all those spaces because of its shape. And thus you can see what's really going on. Like you can see how everything is what's affecting one thing, aka sometimes they call that the Akashic records, but even those terms have been highly misused because this is a field like for an alien in a sense. It's a jump room. You need to put in your coordinates before it takes you anywhere. This means you need to know what you're doing. You remember how they said, it's another metaphor, that when they found the UFOs, that it looks like the beings that were inside were controlling it with their minds because there was no controls in there. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the DVD, the Merkaba, the cube is actually projected from the mind. Like it's not something that is built on a physical realm. And so this is the key to all the knowledge, because it lets us know that the spiritual realm existed before the physical. So that means there is no evolution. We don't come from apes. It's a top-down effect on a fall. We're not a lesser species getting into a greater species. We are a great species beyond greatness that is being diverse and divided into being lesser beings, or being convinced that we're lesser beings. So
Man,
there you have it.
So there you have it.
I mean, and then the icing on the cake is that's what a pyramid does when you dump water into it. Like they have now these new vortex implosion things that reshape the water. What if I told you that water is the byproduct of spirits? Some people are like, what are you talking about? How can water contain energy? What kind of energy are we talking about? Like if you went to an Arab in the Arabesque, where you guys got the Arab language or the Arab mathematics from, right? But 1,000 years ago in Persia, then when our imam was still running around, and you told a person about just vague, oh, it was an alien, it was God, it was Muhammad, they needed a lot more description of what you were talking about, because it served that level of explanation to the degree of what you were talking about. It's like, we're talking about the underpinnings to universes, not how to make a pizza. So there's these details that are necessary, or else you create your worst nightmare. So how do we do that? When we create children that grow up to become dominant over us. The children is a state of mind, by the way. That's why they depict Satan in times as a child. They pick Yahweh as a child because they're still in not so much as the innocent stage, because that's a baby. Understand the difference. But that phase where everything they're doing is like they're not considering the knowledge of reason. You see what I mean? It's like, as a grown-up, you have gained reasoning and experience. As a child, you haphazardly do things. So if you hate, that's childish. So that's what I was saying before, is that these beings are not on a higher frequency. That's why higher frequencies have no problem dealing with these energies. If you can get into those higher frequencies, you're not going to have problems. But because that's the whole fact of it, is that just because of the way that they think, quote unquote, this whole holding people down and keeping knowledge away, it's also keeping them in a certain frequency. And as long as they can appear to everyone else that they're the good ones and the great ones, and then that's going to keep everyone's frequency lower than theirs by proxy. But the moment that a person starts to realize what they really are, man, they start rising. They kick off a biological chain reaction that is very similar to puberty. People don't realize that we have these biological chain reactions that are not necessarily controlled by us. Children generally go into puberty all around the same time. So what controls puberty? A planet. See, that's what was figured out in the alchemy, is what planets stimulate you wanting to go into puberty versus what planets can stop puberty. You see? So this is just one example of the many different networks of information that were available within encompassing this knowledge. But obviously what's needed the most at times, Robert, is just like a battery. When you charge a battery, they have this thing that's called a dead cell. This is mean the battery cannot hold a charge anymore. Many individuals have dead cells. This is the cancer. That means serpent, snake. the cancer or the dead cell within inside of them, the worms within inside of them have basically destroyed their cells. Their cells have become cancerous. And the reason why that's important to know is because then you can eat all the goji berries you want. You can eat all the super deformed nuclear hybrids that you want. If you don't have the ability to stay charged or to hold that charge, it just passes right through you. So what we've looked, I mean, this is the dynamics to what's going on with the body. And if I'm talking about all this stuff, why hasn't people been able to accomplish it? Because there's a step-by-step procedure. Just like when you're cleaning your body, you clean your body out based on the seasons, or at least in the proper order. You can't clean out your spleen before you clean out your liver, or you'll flush all of the toxins from your liver into your spleen. You see, so there, even the seasons of how the earth works is also the season to how our body cleanses itself. So basically what I'm saying is that if you want to know anything about what's going on here, we have to study the body from a metaphysical level because it is the map. That's the good news. We didn't leave ourselves without a map, and we didn't leave ourselves without a ship. We actually are inside of it. This body is the map to the immediate universe, with the primary chakras playing as the primary celestial spheres around us, and the minor meridians playing as the different star points around us. And so this means that we can navigate and change the poles of our bodies based on what kind of energy we want to inherit, with even things simple as high Gaussian magnets placed in the proper place, which is called bioenergetics. So basically there's this storehouse of information that is being unleashed to this humanity, with real understanding of how it works, tied into all the other stuff that people need to get the what, when, why, where answered before they can believe something like that. And then we're on our way into a next level of expansion together. This is not something, as I said again, you can have individuals such as yourself. You're an achiever. These kind of superheroes I call overachiever, meaning the one who's just going to go above and beyond. So you get people that are like that, right? And then imagine them getting a hold of this kind of information. You don't always have to think about, sometimes we think about our friends at the club, and we think about our friend that we just left his house and he's like in the dumps, and it's still the same thing. We've been telling him, hey man, you need to change your diet. You need to change your way of thought. And then, every time you go and see him, he's like, oh, and then you that reflection bounces off you, and you say to yourself, well, either I don't have what I need to actually fix him, especially if you really care about him, or, something else is going on. So you start blaming yourself. I'm telling you, this knowledge is the key to the arcana. It makes a cripple climb trees. It can perfect an otherwise distorted vehicle. It can allow you to peer into realities that most think are not visible and not even attainable. Now we're at it, because I don't play. Like the other thing is that, and this is the conclusion, I guess, of the conversation. I'm not playing. I basically left a life of being basically a business person that was very successful. So to be very successful in the business world, you have to be serious, unless you just come across one of these good ideas. Now, I'm a good guy. I got a good heart. So I've helped a lot of people, but still I was spiritually dead. Just like they say, the spirit that lives on this planet, who's it in control of now, is the wife of Mars. And she's half dead, half alive. And it says that because human beings are in the same frequency. They walk around as if they're alive, but their soul is just as dead as any person in the cemetery. So that's the metaphor. So when I'm in a reality like that, Malkuth, or moth is the name, meaning a nighttime butterfly. She's beautiful, but she's still a nighttime butterfly. So what happens here in this kind of reality is you can really, really get scarred up in here. I call it the serpent's scar. This is when something happens to you and it keeps going throughout life and life. You get molested, or something occurs when you're developing your base chakras. Because remember, all your chakras in your body are developed as you're growing older. In fact, the first chakra that is developed is connected to why a child can walk. The human being is a gyroscope. So once that first field kicks on, root chakra comes online, spins around the time a child is between 1 to 4 years old. That strength is them being able to walk upright. Not most animals can walk upright because they don't have a developed advanced chakra center like we do. So what happens is that first chakra comes online. But what happens when your chakra is developing and one of these meteors collide into you? This is a person that is off balance. They've been through lifetimes of malevolence, whatever. You're this innocent new star seed that's been born out of space dust and planted into a planet. And then next thing you know, here comes a predator. So then what happens is your chakra doesn't develop properly. It keeps going as we all keep going, right? Like somebody dies, somebody gets hurt, we keep going, right? But we still haven't got that clearance. And that's what I was talking about earlier. So I can finish that
at what I was saying earlier about what used to occur back in the old days is that if you lost someone and then you couldn't get closure. Instead of keep going life after life after life, trying to find that person, like you're basically wandering around astral planes trying to find somebody now, and you're lost yourself, you would go to the temple in a tense, okay, the real temple, and you would call them, meaning there were people that can put you in touch with them so that you can get closure. And that's what places like now today we're calling it Egypt, but that's what those kind of places were originally set up for, not what was going on now. Those places where when you lost like your wife, you would make a pilgrimage to quote unquote Egypt. And the man that was there, who was like a great, great, great grandfather to you, would put you in contact with her again. So that way you could keep growing and keep let her go in a certain tense so you can keep expanding. You see what I mean? And this is, of course, the dangers of things like even marriage. You have to understand marriage is a Martian concept. It's Mars. Mars attempts to meld you and bind you with other things that don't let you see that you're everything. And this is sometimes a drawback of the planet is we can choose one thing and then start allowing that to let us cut off everything else. And so it's all about, man, tapping into the higher sensitive things, because then in that state, there's no division. Like I connect to every single female that is on this planet, and that's not something that my wife is jealous of. You see what I mean? Because it's done on a level where it's not the luster. You know what I mean? The whole Venusian Playboy bunny. Now remember, the rabbit comes in because the Mayans used to call the beings that came as the kings, the rabbits. They call the 16 rabbit, the first rabbit. But these rabbits were nothing like that little cute bunny. But I'll tell you, that bunny is a domestication, and you can still see that it's related to Venus and it's related to the moon, because every time during a full moon, if you watch the rabbits in the wild, they go do a funny dance. Right. And then obviously, Venus is tracing out the pentagram into the night sky. So there's a major connection with that type of symbolism, but it's really fertility. So that closes the entire circle. Remember I said in the beginning, the ones who came from Venus or the Amor, serpent, aka penis, went into the planet or sphere, penetrated it, and then began to birth and bring life into the planetary system, right? And then they were fertile gods, meaning that they were fertility gods. They didn't just fertilize human beings, they fertilized the soil, which brought us flowers in the shape of pentagram. It brought us incubation of more advanced life, like shells. Like when you see shells in mollusks, the first development is the shell. The mollusk lives within the shell for a prolonged period. The mollusk does what we call die. The ethereal part of the mollusk rises into another vessel or another chamber, is encased within that chamber, becomes animate again, aka back to life as another being. And this is what Darwin attempted to pull out as evolution. But really, again, we have to understand there's a different level of developments of the souls now. There's weights and measures to the spirits. There's much more complexity. And in this, we become denizens and citizens, inhabitants of the universe, the Innerverse. And it's a big thing. It's not fake. It's something that we're just going to be getting into. So it's new for us, but there's a lot of excitement attached to it because anything new has that kind of thing, and it just keeps going and it keeps going. So that's what's up.
Yeah. So check out astralquest.com. If you haven't been there yet, go check it out and see all these different things that Sevan is working on. There's astralquest.com. It'll take you to the Revolution, where you can sign up. You can download his free book, The Code to the Matrix, and there is more stuff there than you can explore than you will know what to do with for any given part of time. We're going to do our best to have Sevan back on, because
that was 3 hours.
That was 3 hours, man. But there's so many.
Like I remember the thing said it could either go on from 30 minutes to 3 hours. Yeah. It looks like we chose the 3 hour option.
Well,
the good
thing is you have the option. I just have, like, you hit. I obviously didn't want to interrupt you, but you hit on probably a dozen different things that I want to spend an entire episode about, just to get into
kind of the plan.
What's that?
That'll be kind of the plan next time. That'll be kind of the plan next time when we do meet, is that we'll just go off because I know you're going to come up with some very, very impacting questions, especially from what you already know, because I've obviously been listening to you also in the conversation. I'm just happen to be the guest, so I got to do a lot of the talking, but I see the depth of your mind and the level of comprehension that you have. So those to me are the most valuable questions, because they're not only, they're actually directly what people need to know. It's like it is because, and that's so that's something I'm always available for. So just let me know. But obviously, it's being 3 hours in the conversation, we're kind of nearing the closing point. But it's been awesome. I feel like we got a chance to really go through a little bit at least of everything, but definitely an episode that if a person listens to, they can listen to quite a few times and pick up.
Yeah, it was. And please, if any of you guys are following Joe and myself, hope you took your alpha brain for that one, because that was pretty wild. I had some stuff that Sevan was throwing that went way over my head, and I had some things that I definitely picked up on in that conversation. That, I mean, there's certain words, phrases, things that are done in a certain manner where certain people understand where they both came from because they're made in that kind of specific, like, red flag. Hey, this is not, this doesn't sound right here. Which it kind of, it hints that you need to look further into that for either one of us. So I really want to go back and talk about a lot of those points later. So hopefully we can get together and schedule something. I know you recorded a little bit from the beginning, which is an awesome idea. And I had a little thing go out towards the end.
I got the beginning. And I didn't actually get the end. Like, so
okay.
we'll have to collaborate our two tracks because my thing ran out of batteries here. But,
I'll edit.
I got that.
And maybe even bring another friend or two of mine that I think would love these conversations in on them.
For sure.
And we'll see if we can get like the 3 or 4 of us to like round table and talk about just all this kind of stuff and where it hits our different studies and ideologies and what we do think about the world. And maybe we'll save the world someday. Who knows?
Man, I would like to get together and solve it, like, for sure. Like, I want to, because this is where we're at. Like, all the knowledge information is from in front of us. The application is there. Now it just needs the vessels that are going to actually carry it out.
Sweet.
So, and it's a real thing. Like that, it's kind of difficult to kind of believe it's a real thing, though. I know. Even and although I've seen, it's like a dream. You know how sometimes you have a very impacting dream and then, man, I'm never going to forget that dream. And sometimes 3-4 days later, you're acting like you didn't even have that dream. And I tell you, it happens even when you have massive spiritual experiences and you see other things. It's like still after a while, it needs to continuously be refreshed. And I found that is refreshed with individuals that are on the same frequency as you.
And the 3 or 4 of us, definitely 100%. So it's on. Yeah. So thanks.
Okay.
Thanks again for being with us. If you could send me that little clip from the beginning.
Pleasure.
It was
okay. Yeah, for sure. I'll go ahead and compile that, and I'll get it to the email.
Now I know why I was looking forward to this for the last couple of weeks, man. I said, I think I just made a long-term friend.
I got some stuff to ponder too.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, man. And it's been beautiful, man. I greatly appreciate it. And together, man, like, I know that there's nothing that we can't accomplish at all. We're already on our way. Like, this is a massive conversation. I'm sure people are going to hear about it. Also, let me know when you're going to put it up finally, because then I'll have of course, let everyone know in the Resistance so they can check it out.
Wow. So that was Sevan Bomar from astralquest.com and resistance2010.com. I knew that was going to be a long and an interesting one. I think I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that 3 or 4 times, so I can even take in as much as as we went over. That's very information heavy, that's for sure. But I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys had a lot of fun listening. That was great. And again, since there was so much to talk about there, I don't think our brains could possibly manage anything else at this point. So we'll forego the regular interlude music and famous Freemason segment because I think that's enough for us to handle at this point. So thank you guys for joining this ride. Like I said, it's kind of get a lot more interesting. That was definitely a fun one right there. So we're going to talk to Sevan hopefully quite a bit more, because I think there are some specific topics where he and I can probably go back and forth quite a bit. And I want to see if I can get like a round table of, some other people that we've had on this show, like, Brother Robert Johnson and Jeannie and Sevan and, some other people, and maybe see if we can tackle some of life's bigger questions. Cause I think, whoever it is, whatever you call him, has definitely put me in touch and in circles with a lot of the people that seem to ponder the same crazy things that I ponder. And you guys that are here, I think you're still, you're obviously doing it too. So maybe we can try and tackle some of these things that we all ask ourselves and have fun while we're doing it. So thanks to all you for being here with me today. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks again to Sevan. That was, that was a lot of fun, man. Again, that's why I get into this stuff, because you're not going to see that on Fox News. You're not going to hear it rather. And again, check out his website, astralquest.com. And the resistance2010.com, because there's so much stuff on there. Again, I've talked about the websites, sacredtext.com that I love, that has all these different, anywhere you want to go and look at any kind of religious history, it's got every book out there. Well, I think the esoteric text and some of the parts of Astral Quest and Resistance2010.com have these same things, where it's basically anything and everything at your fingers that you could possibly imagine. And I mean, that's the amazing thing, is that's what our ancients talked about, was this ability for humans to communicate, for us to have technology and all these different things at the tips of our fingertips. And I think we're there, and we don't even realize that this is kind of what humanity's been looking forward to for a very long time. So yeah, again, thank you guys for joining me on this one. I'm going to try and get Sevan back sooner rather than later. So if any of you guys have questions about this, because I know we went over a lot of subjects that some we didn't even have enough time to circle all the way back to. So if there's any questions that you guys specifically have, head them up to me, or you can go, to astralquest.com by, on your own and ask Sevan, or, maybe you can email me at rpl@farfromcenter.com. And we can try to put together a question list for the next time we have Sevan on, because, again, as long as he's willing to come on and talk, we're going to ask him to come on, because that was a lot of fun for me, man. Okay, so I'm going to stop now. Again, this episode, probably more than any other, has been brought to you by Alpha Brain by Onnit, man. So if you haven't tried it yet, if you're having a little bit of trouble digesting all the stuff that you just heard us talking about, give it a shot. I endorse it, but more importantly than me, all the smart people I know endorse it. It's a lot of fun. You can check through those banners on farfromcenter.com, or you can use that checkout code RPL. Both of them are going to give you 10% off your order. Both of them are going to send a little bit of money back to the show so we can do these things and keep the lights running, keep the sound playing, keep the internet, keep the websites, keep all this fun stuff going. So check that out. Again, doing your Christmas shopping on Amazon. As I'm doing this, it's the 18th right now, so hopefully you've already done your shopping, but if you haven't yet, remember, click through those links on farfromcenter.com and do your shopping there. Okay, so thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. As we do every time, I like to ask now that if you have a drink in your hand, or preferably two, you would raise it or them and join me in saying Berg Heil, De Bresseli Bear, and most importantly, God bless America.